Hello there, welcome to NameTech. My name is Nehemiah Wakesa and I'll be your instructor for the SQL complete course. It's going to be a beginner base, so you don't need to even know anything about SQL or even programming generally. It's going to accommodate everyone. Now, since we have some people that have some prior knowledge on the SQL, maybe you just want to have a refresher, maybe some parts which are irrelevant for you, you can always skip. And also for beginners, the video might be some few hours. I don't know how long it's going to take, but you don't have to learn everything in one session. Maybe you can split in parts. You can even take even a week or even a month or so. For this one, we are going to learn in a beginner way, and we also have the write-ups of the same on our learning management system. So go to nametech.com, then I go to courses, and then look for the SQL. You're going to find the SQL complete course there. Then click on it, enroll. It's just free course. Then you'll see the content. Now, first of all, the SQL is a programming language, and some people might be wondering what is programming language, or generally what is computer programming, because I say that we might be having some people that don't have any knowledge about computer programming generally. So first of all, computer programming is just a way to instruct the computer to do things, to do tasks. So there could be different type of tasks, maybe web programming task, data science task, or whatever task, or maybe you just want to execute something. Let's say something like a calculator. You can key in some digits, then you'll be receiving a response in form of a results. Anything that can take in an input and then a returns an output could be considered as a machine. So the way you instruct it to do those tasks is what we call computer programming. Now, the machines mostly understand the zeros and one, they understand the binaries. In fact, previously, before these high-level programming language, we used to have machine code. Machine code, it was using only zeros and one. Let's say you wanted to write something like a hello. You'll need to convert that hello, which is in a human readable way. You'll have to convert it into zeros and one, so that the machines will be able to interpret it or maybe understand it. So we have the machine code, then later we had the assembly language, and then we also had the high level language. So these are human readable, mostly similar to the English language, similar to almost English language, the high level languages. And then we have the structured programming language, and we also have the object oriented, and we have the modern languages like Agoras and so forth. But then in a nutshell, programming language, they are going to act as a tool to convert our human readable or maybe our human understandable stuff in a way that the computer will be able to understand. We said that once again, the machines only understand the binaries. What are binaries? The zeros and one. Now, if you want to construct anything, or let's say you want to write something like a million or 100 or any content, you will need to convert it in zeros and one so that it can form that sentence or that statement you're trying to write. Now, it is very difficult to do that. Now, that's where now the programming language comes in. Now, programming language is going to act as a mediator or a tool that is going to stand in between with the humans and the machines. So we can write the script or programs in our human readable way, or maybe in a language that we can be able to understand through a programming language. And that programming language, it has the syntax. Syntax, these are like the set of rules that you need to follow when you're writing those instructions, or maybe when you're trying to write in your human readable way, like whatever you're trying to write. So you need to follow those rules. Similar to how you could have written an email. You want to write an email, so you'll have the subject part, you'll have the email part, the body part. So if you want to send a successful email, then you will need to provide those on their specific fields. Like I will not provide the content on the email part, or maybe the subject on the body part, or maybe the content area. So you need to follow like the email part will belong to the email, the subject part will be at the subject, and then now the content will be at the body section for the email to be delivered very well. So similar to these are programming languages. So we have several. Remember their main task is just to convert our language like to convert what we are trying to instruct it like in our human readable. For example, in English you can be writing something that you can understand, you can read, but then since the machines are not going to understand, so provided you follow those syntax and then you write now your instruction there, then the programming language is going to convert it in a way that the machines will be able to understand, provided you have followed those rules. So all the programming languages, we have many of them, but they have the rules that you need to follow for it to be able to communicate with the machines. So once it receives the instruction, then it will encode it in a way that the machines will understand. Then, for example, if the instruction was to execute something, then again, for you to see it, then the machine will return the response to the programming language, and then the programming language will also decode it in a way that we can also be able to understand. So there's that communication. So the programming is going to act as the mediator. Now remember, computer programming generally is just a way of instructing the computer to do those tasks. And we're using a programming language as a tool to communicate with the machines. Then now the machines will return the response to us through that programming language, and those instructions that will be writing, they are called codes. They are called code through a programming language, and then the programming language will encode in a way that the machines will understand. And then, for example, if it understands the instruction, and for example, if the instruction was to do something, then it's going to also return the response to that programming language in form of zeros and one. Now, SQL is also a programming language, and a programming language to work with databases. And what a database? So let me try to read some content here that have been written. So remember, everything is here on the write-ups on this site, on this course. A database is an organized collection of structured information or data typically stored electronically in a computer system. Think of it as a digital filing cabinet that can store, organize, and retrieve vast amount of information quickly. So the main purpose of the database system is to do it, to store, to organize, and also retrieve, and sometimes even manipulate. Now, a database can be used in different scenarios, in different cases, like examples where the database can be used is like, for example, on social media, like platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all these other platforms. They use database of different types. So you can use it on the social media, e-commerce, banking system, the healthcare, education, entertainment, and many other things. So you notice that this is a skill that you must know. So we have different types of databases, and I can group them into two categories. Although we have different type of databases, but I can group them into two. So we have the relational and the non-relational. So on the non-relational is going to incorporate all other databases that are not structured, that they are not relational. Remember, we have many type of databases, but I've just grouped them into two: the SQL, the structured, like the relational, and the non-relational. So for the relational, we'll be using the SQL. I say that we are going to learn the SQL. So the SQL is a language, is a programming language that we use to work with the relational database. What are relational database? The database that stores data in a structured way in formats of rows and columns. And you can be able to even reference another table. You can be able to reference another table. So we'll need a software, something like a software where we can be able to perform such things like for matter storage, retrieval, manipulation, and all that. So we have the systems or maybe softwares that you can use to perform such a thing. Now remember, also in programming, I forgot to mention, like those instructions will be writing on an editor. You will need to have an editor, dedicated platform or an IDE where you are going to write what? Those instructions, or we call them codes, so that the programming language is going to send it, is going to compile and send it to the machines. Machine will interpret it, will understand, then return the response. For example, if it was to execute something, it's going to do that. Now you'll be writing those things, those instructions on an IDE or maybe an integrated development environment. You'll not be writing on Word. You'll be writing on a dedicated platform called Code Editor. So that's just a platform. But then for the database, for the SQL, we need to have some kind of a software that is going to handle the storage, retrieval, and manipulation of the data. Software for handling the storage, retrieval, accessing, manipulation. We call it a relational database management system. We are going to talk about those tools in a few. So it's going to act as a platform or a software or a system, and most of them they are pretty much the same because they are using the SQL. You'll be writing, for example, on a platform or on an interface, like for example, on MySQL is a relational database management system. It has Workbench. Workbench is like now it has a platform where you can be able to write those instructions, those code. So it's going to be like, so it has the IDE where you're going to write the programs, and then at the same time the platform is going to handle the storage, retrieval, and all that. So we have different type of relational database management system or the softwares for working with the SQL, and we have the MySQL, we have PostgreSQL, the SQLite, and many other things, many other relational database management system, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, and many others. But for this one, I'll be using MySQL. Now remember, this is not MySQL. This one is not a different programming language, just a system to work with the relational databases. Now, so we are going to install the requirements for us to be able to work with the SQL, and I will say that in this course we are going to use MySQL. This one is much more popular. It is an old version of the relational database management system. It has also a lot of community support, but for production I will encourage anybody to use PostgreSQL. This one is an open source, and it's more powerful, by the way. But then I'm going to use this MySQL because this one is much close to the SQL. Most commands you can just tell that these are SQL commands. Like on these ones, you might be having some syntax that could be a little bit tricky. But the reason I'm teaching with the MySQL to transition from MySQL to PostgreSQL or any other is much easier. So this one is like the mother, not really the mother, but I can say more like a mother of the rest, because this one is like the old one. So we are going to use what MySQL as a software or a system for handling the SQL. So how do you install it? So you go to a new tab here, okay, like on your favorite browser, and then search for MySQL. Okay, should be MySQL download. MySQL download. Okay, it should be download, and then now it's going to give you the results. It's going to give you the results. Then make sure that you're clicking this link that has www.mysql.com, and then /downloads, or maybe just click here, or just click on this link. This link is going to take me to the downloads tab, but I know if you remove the downloads, it might take you to this landing, this website. So make sure that you click on the downloads tab. So this is the downloads tab, and you could be using a different operating system. Maybe you're using Linux, you're using the Mac operating system, you're using Windows. So here at the bottom, once you are on the downloads page, you will scroll down, and then you will see several links, but make sure that you're using this MySQL we are using this MySQL Community General Public License downloads. So this one you will not need to pay for anything. Make sure that you're using this community version. So you click on it. So make sure that you select everything that you need. But then on this case, we are going to use this MySQL installer for Windows. It's going to come as a standalone installer with everything. So we'll not need to install individual aspects differently. So for the Windows users, I'm going to demonstrate how to do that on Windows because I'm using a Windows operating system. But then now, for different operating system, I know you know how you usually install your open source program. So just come here, look for what you need. Like you might need to have the router, the server. Make sure that you select what you need. So let me click here on MySQL installer for this operating system, which is Windows. Now, by the time we are doing the video, it is version is 8.0.43, but you might be having previous version. I don't know. In future, you'll be watching because this one we are uploading on video. You might be watching in the future. So we are going to install this one. We are going to install this standalone. So I'm going to use this option to download the standalone, and it's going to take me to this page, and they are encouraging people to download or maybe signing up. And if you don't want to do that, then you can say click here, no thanks, just start my download, and then it's going to automatically do it, start the download of the installer. So the next step here is to do it is now to install it. So I'll go where it is installed, downloaded. So it is downloaded on my downloads folder. So I'm going to double click for the Mac operating system. You know what you usually do when you double click on it on your Mac OS. It's going to show you a prompt or maybe a window to move it to the applications folder. So make sure that you do that, and then you can I think, yeah, and then it's going to be installed on your system. Now for the Windows, I'll double click here. I will double click on this installer, then it's going to show an installation wizard. Like once I double click on this one, then it's going to open what Windows installer. So if it's your first time, make sure that you're using this full installation installation. Make sure that you click here on the full, because it's going to come with everything that is required for it to work well, or maybe for you to work with MySQL well. So you need to it's going to come with the MySQL server. It's going to come with the shell. It's going to work with the MySQL router, the Workbench, and some other things. So make sure that you select the full. Then I click here on the next. Now here it's going to do it. It's going to download, and then it's going to install these requirements that we had selected. So guys, once it has downloaded and installed, then you can click here on the next, and then you will configure these things here. I just click on the next. In fact, leave everything the way they are. The port is very key. Make sure that everything is left the way it is. Then I click on the next. Also click on the next. Don't mind about this nini. Just use the default selected, this first option. Then select here. Now here you will need to provide the password, and make sure that the password is the password is very strong, and also don't share it with another person. But then since this one I'm trying to we are learning, I can have here even my password being seen. This just for demo. I can even call the password demo password. But then for you, make sure that you're using a very strong password, and no one should know it. So okay, I don't know what I've written. In fact, let me just, you can write it on somewhere. Let me, like, for example, let me call it demo password. Demo password. Let me just call this a demo password. Remember this for testing. Okay, for learning purposes. But make sure that you don't expose your passwords. Make sure that it's very strong. In fact, it should be very strong. It could be containing the letters, the numbers, the special characters. Make sure that it is very, very strong. It's very, very strong. And then once you have provided it, then click here on the next. Everything, leave them the way they are. Then here click on the next, and then grant all access. Make sure that you're using this unless you want to configure so that you can deny some access to the user, some other users, but then just give you access to everything if you want it to be accessed globally. And then like at the system level, sorry, not globally. I don't mean in terms of the geographic whatever, but then on the computer and to be accessed in the system wide. Then I click on the next, and then I click here execute so that you can configure everything there. I'll give it a moment, and then I'm going to apply the configuration so that everything can work well. Then let me click here on the finish. Then the next step is also on the configuration of the router. Remember, this one was on the server, so this one is on the router. So on this one is where now you're configuring, for example, matters about the port and all that. Here, just leave everything the way they are. Then I click here on the finish. Then the last one is here for the products. Here, this is not that serious. Just click here on the next. And then on this other one, now you'll make sure that the username remains to be root, unless just use root. I think there's no problem. Just use root. Then the password, make sure that you're using the password that you had configured before. Make sure that it matches. Otherwise, the configuration will not work. So this one I've checked is configured, is working well, though it is a weak password. But then now for the demo, you can see it's working well. Then here, click again next, and then I click here on the execute to apply the configuration for the server configuration. Give it a moment, and then once it's done, then I click here on the finish. And then again, click now next. Click on the next, and then you can choose to start the shell. But then I don't want to use this one at the moment. We might use it later. At the moment, let's just start the Workbench. Workbench is now like the graphical user, like an application where you can be able to interact with it. So let me click here on the Start Workbench, and then it's going to start the Workbench there. You're going to give it a moment. So this is the Workbench, or a platform where you can be able to interact with MySQL. Now, if it's not there, if it doesn't, like for example, if you have closed and you want to identify it, you want to find it. So what you'll need to do is to go to the apps, and then go to all, and then just look for Workbench, MySQL. Okay, not Workbench. Look first of all from MySQL. Then from the MySQL folder, if you are on Windows, you'll be able to see what Workbench. So this Workbench is now the graphical user interface, the GUI, where we're able to even interact with the MySQL. So for me, I've pinned here at the taskbar for easy access. You might also want to do the same. And then when you double click here, it's going to prompt you to enter the password. I'm going to enter the password on this instance, the connection. Now, you might want to save it in the vault here, so that next time you'll not need to provide the password again. It's going to remember the password that you had saved here. So let me click here on it to save, so that if I will close here, when I click it again, I will not need to provide the password again. So this is the default interface when you log in. So it might be on the administration side, but our focus will be here on the schema. So there's this tab for the administration. Click here on the schema. Schemas, these are like the database, only that you have some additional things, including the functions, the procedures, and views. We'll learn more about those things in details as we go on. So a quick overview here. The schemas, these are like a database. If you want to create a new one, you can right click, then create your schema, then you can give it a name, for example, test. so you can create it that way. Now you notice it's going to give me these commands even if I'm using the graphical user interface, at least trying to show me the commands. And this is not the best approach, or maybe the best practice for me to teach, like you are seeing things before you. Because I remember the thing here is that I want us to learn each and every command. So mostly I'm not going to use the default work. I'm not going to use this this editor here. I'm going to use an external one called Notebook. You don't have to do that. You can even use it directly here. But to create a database, you'll be using this create schema, or you can write that command here. Let me just. You don't have to do this. We are going to come to it in a detailed manner. But then let me open this. Let me open this tab. Now, for example, if you wanted to create a database here using the code, we'll talk about it in details in a few. But then you can as well use this IDE. For example, create a database, and then the database name. For example, let's say users or whatever. And then you use this flash, this icon here, the play, I think the flash. Then it's going to create. When you refresh here, you'll see the user has been created. Now for the tables, if you have an external table, you'll have to right click here. You will need to right click on the tables. Then you can use this table data import wizard. Then it's going to open the wizard for importing. We'll demonstrate that one later. Also, if you wanted to import an external, like a database that was created somewhere else, you want to import it here, then I will be clicking on the server, then server, then import data import. Now, in the next step, we are going to configure the learning environment, or maybe a platform where we're able to write the code. Because you notice, for example, on this one, if you want to do something, it can give you the code. And the best approach, I don't want us to see the syntax even before we write it. Like I want us to go step by step so that you understand each and everything. I don't want to see the auto-completion features. When you're using the IDE, like this one is going to give you the auto-completion feature. But then for the demo, and I'm also a data scientist, so mostly I use the notebooks, and it's a good platform for demo. You don't have to do that, but for teaching you the SQL, because I want you to understand each and everything, I'll be using it for learning purposes. But then for you, you can just write here directly. So in the next step, we are going to configure the working environment, or maybe the IDE, or maybe the learning platform. You don't have to do that. You can use it directly here on the Workbench. But then now for me, I'm going to use an external platform just for teaching purposes. So for you to use the notebook, you need to have Python on your system. I said you don't have to do that. If you want to do it, just type python.org, then go to the downloads, then download Python. Once you have downloaded the Python, you will need to have the notebook where you are going to write now the SQL code. Although we'll need to have some additional packages or libraries for us to be able to work with the SQL on the notebook well, because it's an IDE for Python. So we'll need to install some other dependencies later. Now once you have installed Python, download, then install, just straightforward. Then once you install, then open the CLI, the command line tool, like PowerShell, the PowerShell, so command prompt here, and then you're going to use a Python package manager called PAP, which comes with it by default. Like when you install Python, it's going to come with it by default. So just type PAP install notebook. Just type here notebook, and then it's going to install. Just type PAP install notebook on your command prompt, or on your terminal. A command line tool could be a terminal, PowerShell, Git Bash, Conda for Anaconda. You might be using terminal for different OS like Mac, Linux, Ubuntu, or whatever. Just right there on that terminal, just type there PAP install notebook. Then it's going to install it on your system. Now for me, I already had it. It's going to tell me the requirement already satisfied, but then for you it may take some few seconds or minutes to download it depending on the internet. Now once you have it, then find where the file is placed, or maybe where your project is. Now for me here it is on the desktop. Okay, like basically for organizational purposes, you might want to create a folder, dedicated folder for working on whatever project it is, or maybe even for learning. Now for me here, I'm going to place it on I'm going to place it on a folder like the YouTube. I think there's something about YouTube courses. I'm trying to find it. Should be YouTube should be at the end, here at the bottom. And then for the SQL, then on the crash course in the inside here, okay, or maybe here the root, I can open it. I can open it here. Now you need to navigate to this via the CLI, but then the easiest way if you are on Windows is to just navigate to that path, and then here at the top you can just highlight everything, then type there Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Notebook, or type there, for example, if it fails, you can type Python and then a -m. When you type here -m, is going to identify the path where Python is located, and then it's going to open the Jupyter Notebook through that path. So when you do it this way, then it's going to open. Now if it fails, I know some computers might fail to open it directly, to open the Jupyter Notebook directly. What you might want to do is to use an online server, an online notebook from the Google Colab. So just look for Google Colab. This is Google Colab. Then just click on it. It's going to take you to colab.google. Then I click here on the new notebook. This one will be dependent on the internet, but then now the one that we have installed, this one will be dependent on the system configuration, like the installation on your computer. Is going to use your resources on the computer. So once again, if you want to install it, like the online version, I said that you go to colab.google, then look for the notebook, new notebook, then it's going to open the notebook, this one. Now if you want to configure it, or maybe open the one that you have downloaded, I say that you go to the path where your project is, then here at the top you can click here at the end. Then if you are on Windows, that is, then type there Python 3, Python, then -m, then Jupyter Notebook, to open it. Now if you are on different operating system that I will not show you the path, what you want to do is to navigate to it by using the CLI. There is some steps, like first of all, you can use a command. First of all, dir if you are on Windows, or ls if you are on Mac, or what do we call it, Linux, to list the directories you have. Now for me, I have here desktops. So for me, now that I see I have that folder, I can use the navigate to it by doing the cd, and then desktop, top, and then on the desktop I can use the ls if you are on a different operating system, or dir if you are using the command prompt dir, and then I have these YouTube courses. So let me clear or xls, and then I'm going to type here cd. Now since it's a multi-word, then I write here in quote like that. Then I will navigate to it. Then I here just type here notebook, or maybe just type there what do you call it, Jupyter notebook, or begin with Python, then a -m. So if this one fails, you will type there Python -m. So all in all, it's going to do it is going to open the Jupyter notebook on the browser. Now once it opens, don't close this one because it's going to act as the server that is powering this notebook here on the web. Don't close it. And then once you are here, then click here on new, and then Python 3. Python 3, then this is the notebook that we are going to use. This is a notebook that we are going to use. So once again, let me repeat this easiest step for the Windows users. So navigate to your SQL project, okay, like where the project is, like here on the SQL. Let me delete first of all this one, and this one. This is YouTube courses, and this is SQL. And then on the SQL, we have the SQL crash course. And then on the crash course, I can click here on the path here at the top, at the end, or I can CD or navigate to it, to the current directory or path. Then type there Python 3, or just type Jupyter Notebook, Python -m, and then Jupyter Notebook, and then it's going to open what the Jupyter Notebook on that directory. So once it has opened, then you will need to create now a new notebook file. You will need to create a new notebook file. How do you create a new notebook file? You click here on the new, then you are going to click here on Python 3, and then here at the top, you will give it a name. Let's just call it SQL. Now, as you can tell, this is a Python IDE. In fact, it tells you here it is Python 3. How can we be able to work with a Python IDE on the SQL program? So we can use the dependencies, some packages that can help us work with it. So how do you do that? You can use these packages. You can run pip. Let me zoom in. Pip install. We are going to install some dependencies here. First of all, it's MySQL. MySQL. Then also we will need to have the pip install. Okay, pip install the SQL Alchemy. We are going to install the SQL Alchemy, and then also we are going to install here pip install Python SQL. By the way, you can get more about this thing, like in fact, let's try to search it on web so that you can get the actual file name. So you can go to the official website for these packages, Python packages, which is py. Just type pip install, and then it's going to show you this one. So you know, some other operating system are sensitive to the file name, like this one is case sensitive. Okay, like some operating system are case sensitive, so make sure that you are getting the correct path, okay, the correct file. So let me just do it this way. Also for the SQL Alchemy, let me also do the same thing. Just do a search here. Now this is in the event, for example, you also want to learn with the notebook. You might want to do this, but then I say this is unnecessary. You can write it on the notebook directly. But then if you wanted to also learn it on the notebook, like basically the reason is I wanted to be on a totally different environment, so that when we write the code, you're able to know the code very well. So this is it. Yeah, so I think this is the correct one. Yeah, so you can run this program. Let me make it a comment. You can run this on a command line tool, or if you want to use it here directly, you want to install on the notebook, you will have to begin with the exclamation before this pip. But then the easiest way, let me just run it on CLI. So I will need to open the command prompt or bash or whatever. Let me write command prompt for your Windows users or terminal for different operating system. I'm going to install this one. Just press there and then run. And then also you need to have this SQL Alchemy. So all of these, their main purpose is for us to be able to communicate or run. Let me also run this one, like for us to be able to establish the connection to that Workbench, which is an external application. Also this one, you need to do this way. Now for me, I had installed everything, but then just to show you, I have done that. Now everything is now ready. So once we have installed them, we'll need to use them. So in a new file, we'll need to install the SQL for magic commands, especially this interactive Python here. I will need to type there. I'll begin with the percent, then I'll write there load underscore ext. Load extension here is SQL. So anytime you want to run the notebook, you will need to run first of all this command. You will need to run this command so that you can be able to use that magic command, so that you can be able to write now the SQL commands or code on the Jupyter notebook. Now the next thing, you will need to establish the connection to this Workbench. When you go home here and then click here on this gear icon, you'll be able to see the configuration details. Like you can see, there's a host name, there's a port, there's a username, there's a password which we had already stored in the vault, and we already know it. So this one is the IP address for all the local environment, but then the alias to it is localhost. So I'll be using the localhost. So these are the details that I'm going to use to configure or establish the connection on the notebook here. This is the syntax. You'll need to begin with the, let me begin with, okay, this is the syntax for you to be able to establish the connection. Actually, now this hash is a comment, or is a Python comment. You don't have to do that. But then now the syntax, it is MySQL, okay, MySQL plus pi MySQL, then let me zoom in, okay, pi MySQL, then okay, just a moment. Okay, pi MySQL, then we type there this, okay, I think this way, right? Is it? First of all, let me see first of all how this thing is. I'm trying to look on something here, for example, HTTP. Oh yeah, first of all, it's the colon. Actually, I had forgotten already. So it should be now the colon. Is it the colon before the 2 forward slashes, like this, to establish the connection? And then here it is a host. This is no, not host name, actually username. User name, and then username, then what follows is the password. Password, you'll provide here the password. Then after the password, you'll be providing the port. But then how do you separate the password to the host name? Sorry, not the port, the host name. You use the @ symbol. Now you might want to make sure that your password do not have the symbol for @ because on the syntax, if you want to establish the connection on the notebook, this @ symbol, it is used to do it, is to separate the password and the host name. Let me write here host name. So you don't want to use it like this @ symbol on your password, because it will affect the syntax. Make sure you use another thing apart from the @. Then now from the host name, you can have what? You can have the port number. So let's try to write it now. So it is MySQL. Now you begin with the magic command, this percent then SQL, like that. So we'll have to begin here with the percent SQL for magic command. Then here we will write plus pi MySQL, then colon 2// username, here it was root, and then colon, then a password, it was demo, password which is not that sensitive, that secured. And then now the host name is separate with the @ symbol. Then the host name here will be using that 127.0.0.1, or look, use the alias called localhost. And then our port is that 306. That is 306. The port is accessed here. Here, this is the port. That's a 306. Then the username was root. So if you run it and I don't get an error, then the connection will have been established correctly. So let me begin with the 2% here. Let me begin with the 2%. No, okay. Okay. Let me remove. I think it's 1, not 2. But then MySQL plus pi. Oh, here it is. It is wrong. Pi MySQL. So you begin with percent SQL. Remember this is the syntax. Percent, then SQL, then MySQL plus pi MySQL, and then these are the details. Let's run. Now, if you don't see any error, then the connection will have been established successfully. Yeah, so the other thing is you need to have this line. Basically, due to the dependency conflict, so some packages here, especially for the magic command, it is deprecated, like a depreciated. Is it depreciated or a deprecated? Not to work well with Python. So when you use this decorator, and then you're able to run now the SQL command very well. So it is a percent config, then a space SQL magic.style equals then in quotes you'll write there underscore deprecated underscore default. So make sure that you run this line not to get an error. And remember, anytime that you load the notebook, you'll need to run that load extension so that you can be able to use the magic commands. Then establish the connection, then run this code. So with this configuration, then guys, you are good to go. How can we test that everything works well? So let's go back to the Workbench, and then let me try to delete some of these schemas here. Let me try to drop all of them. Let me drop all of them. We are just using the GUI, but I say that I want us to use the code so that we understand the code visually very well. So let's delete all of them. Now when you refresh here, actually there's no database at all there. So let's try to see if the connection has been established well by trying to write a code that creates a database. Now remember, since we're using it on the notebook, you'll have to begin with the magic command SQL. Then this is the command for creating a database. The SQL command for creating a database, it is create a database, and then let's say users. Then click this play button, this run button on the Jupyter notebook. Now you can see one row was affected. On this other side, you can see it has been created. A database has been created. So now that you know it's working, so we'll be using here on the notebook. Well, the reason I said that I want to use the notebook is just for the learning purposes. Like you can notice here, it's not going to give me the syntax when I try to write, like it's not doing the auto-completion. Like we're going to learn each and every code, you know. I want us to understand each and every command. That's why we had to use a separate platform. This is the notebook. And once again, this percent SQL, this is just some syntax. No, not the syntax actually, it's not part of the SQL syntax, but a magic command to help you work with the SQL here. to work with the SQL on the notebook, but just know that this is not part of the syntax for the SQL command. So guys, I want us to begin with the data definition language, a sub-language under the main SQL. And remember the commands under it, we have the create, alter, drop, truncate, comment, rename. I want us to begin with the create. And we have already created the database. It's already here. When you go to the Workbench, when you refresh this other side, you can see we have this database here. So to create the database, we use this command create database, then the users. Now don't forget that this SQL, this magic command here is not part of the SQL syntax. We are using it because we are on Notebook, and Notebook is a Python IDE. So for us to be able to use SQL on the Notebook, we need to run this a magic command. So this is fine. The other thing that we want to do is to drop it, to delete it. Now to delete the database or maybe the table, you'll be using the command called drop. You'll be using the command called drop, and drop. Now in this case, we want to drop the database. So drop database, then the database name, which is users. The database name is users. So you just run drop database and then users. Then it's going to drop. When you go this other side, you'll see that it is dropped. Like you can't see it there. But I want us to use this database, so I will rerun it again to create. But then now this drop, I'm going to remove it, because if I will run it again, then it's going to remove the database. Now remember, database is like the container where you can have now your tables under it. So this is just like a house that is going to hold what your tables in the inside, the main thing. Now the other thing that I want us to talk about is how to create the table. The command to create the table is just create table, create table. Then you need to provide the table name. Now these are users database. Maybe I can call the user customer. Let me call it customer. I can call it a customer or customers. Now what does a table need? A table needs to have the columns and also the rows. So you need to specify the columns for your table. We are going to begin in a very basic way. Now on the columns, when you're trying to create the table, like columns, you need to specify what kind of the data type that column is going to hold. Like if the content that column should be holding, perhaps if it is strings, if it is integers, or maybe if it is a date or whatever it is. So you need to define it when you are trying to create the table. So in this case, we are creating the customer. So we can provide a column. Maybe I can call it customer ID, the first column, where we can be able to track the ID of our customer. So customer ID, and then the second parameter after the column name is the data type. In this case, the data type we are going to use a variable character, of which it is varchar. I'll use for the data type, I'm going to write here in small. Remember, it's not sensitive to cases, but I'm going to just use it in small. And then you'll need to specify the max number of characters to be entered there. Example 200. And the other thing here is a customer can have also a name. So let me say first name, and then a variable character. Now first of all, an ID should be an integer. So here let me just use an integer. Maybe this one I can paste it there. I had forgotten. The ID, the customer ID should be an integer, not a variable character. Let me use an integer. An integer. And then the name, first name, it will be the first name, it will be a variable character. And then we can also have the last name. We can have the last name, and the last name also could be a variable character. And then maybe the address. Lastly, we can have the address. Now address can be a bit lengthy. Let's use still the variable character, but the maximum number of characters to be entered could be around even let's say 300, because you can have long addresses. So when you're trying to create the table, once again use the command create table, similar to creating the database. Only here you'll be saying table instead of the database, and then you provide the table name. But then when you'll be creating the table, you need to also specify the columns, because a table needs to have what? Needs to have the columns. And then those columns will be holding a particular kind of a data type. So for example, a custom ID, you will know that an ID must be a number. Then for example, a name is a text, so it should be a character field. And then also the address should also be a character. So you need to specify the kind of the data type that column is going to hold. Yeah, so this is how you create the table. So I will need to run it. Now I'm getting this error because this notebook I said is a Python notebook, so it's trying to like identify or check if that code is a Python code. Now this is the reason I say that you must use what the magic command here at the very top. So %% SQL, and then before you write now your code, it's not part of the SQL syntax. Remember, if you write this code directly the other side, then it's going to work. Also, the other thing that is missing here is the database, because this is a table, but then you can be having the same table on many other databases. Could be, for example, different databases with the same table. So you need to specify what kind of a database are you trying to create this table into it. So when I will run this one, I'm going to get what here, an error that the database is not selected. So I will need to begin here with the database, so which is users. So we have already created the database users, it's already here. So you'll need to select it by beginning with the users, then the table. So when you run it, you'll be able to see what the table has been created. So if I will go this other side and then reload and then open this one, and then on the tables you can see now I have the customer. If I will click it, you'll be able to see the table has been created. Now we are going to learn how to be able to retrieve or check the tables via this notebook, because there will be no purpose for us using a notebook and confirming from this other side. Like I will be doing like a lot of work. So basically, if you want to know the tables you have in your database, then you can use a command called show tables. You can use a command called show tables. Show tables, but you need to specify the database where you're trying to show those tables. So in this case, you say from the table database, which is users, and then the statements end with the semicolon. So though it's not a must, because we are using it in cells, like we're splitting the code. But if you are to write here directly, because it's not splitting the code in different sections, like just a continuous file, so you'll need to be writing it in, like writing the closing, the semicolon, so that it will be able to know that this one is terminating here. But then here, since we're using the cells, it's not a must, but it's a good practice to do that. So let's run this one. Now you can see we have what? This table, customers table. We are going to understand how to be able to retrieve the records that are there in the inside, But then on this one, I want us to also learn how to delete the table that you have created. So how do you delete a table? The same command, drop. I'm going to write here drop a table. Now this time it's not the database, it is drop table, then the table name. But then you need to also specify the database where that table belongs, so that you not get an error. Now another option to avoid repeating this database name all the time, it is to establish the connection here at the top with the database. But then now, since we were discussing how to create the database, so I didn't do that earlier, so that you can be able to know how you can be able to create different databases. So I will begin here with the magic command. SQL. Then when I run this one, you can see now I no longer have that table. If I will reload this other side, if I will reload here, you'll see that I don't have the table. If I will, you can see there's no table there, only that here I had already run it, so it is still in the memory. But then here there's no that table. It has been deleted. When you run the show table, you'll see that there will be no table there inside. So again, since you will want to use that table, I'm going to rerun it again, and then now show table, that table is there. So you have understood how to create a table and also how to delete a table. But then there are some other aspects we are going to learn, because you might want, for example, when you're trying to create a table, to add in some constraints. What are the constraints? Like when you're trying to key in the data in that table, like you might want, for example, a particular column not to miss any data, or maybe the data that you are trying to provide on that column should be very unique. Or let's say it is a column about the age. You don't want to allow a particular age of people to go, or maybe to be inserted in that table. So you'll be having those constraints, those restrictions. We are going to learn them later. But still, on the table creation, I want to show you how to create a table from an existing one, like with everything. Like we know so far we have created this table called customer with these fields. So I want us to use the same table we have created, and I create another one that is going to have the same content from this original one. So how do you do that? So again, you'll be using the create table command. The table name, for example, let's call it let's call it let me call it, for example, customer. There are already customers there, or maybe customers. Now this is customer, this is customer. Just wanted to create something that is quite related. So customers, and then now the same, instead of now providing the columns, I'll be using this alias as. This as is like a nickname of something, like you're trying to create this table, but it's going to use what is the content from the other table. So I'll be using the select, which is under the data query language. So I'll be checking the existing one using the data query, or which is select. Now on the select, and then all, I'll use this asterisk to show all from this database, from this table. So like we're using literally everything from the other table. Even if it had the record, it's going to inherit everything there. So when I run this one, remember I had not provided the. Now here I will need to specify the. Sorry. Okay, I forgot to provide here the database. Remember, you need to always specify the database. So the database here is users. Though we are going to fix these issues so that I will not need to be doing this all the time. So this one is going to create this new database, but then now for the columns, it's going to use from this other one. So it is just like inheriting everything from the other one. So now when we run this one, you can say have customer and customers. So how do you see the data you have provided? That one will take us to the data data retrieval. We have already talked about the data retrieval here. In fact, let me just do it now. So if you want to see the tables you have and the columns, then you can use here select. Now, okay, like I don't want to be specifying the database all the time. Now, what I will do, let me just establish the connection with the database here at the top. So I'll say / then the database name, which is users. So when I say this, remember it's also not sensitive to cases, but then let me write here in small. So when you run it this way, when you establish the connection with the database here, So now in the future, it's not a must for you to specify the database. You can just specify the table. So here I'm going to select all. Select all. How do you select all? Using the asterisk, which stands for the arbitrary, like everything. And then from the table, which in the same, we can begin with the customers. Customer. Now when I run this code, you can see it has returned what this table, but since it doesn't have any information, any record in the inside, we have the customer ID, the first name, the last name, like all these details that I will create that table with from this other side. Now also let's try to run that. Sorry, let's try to retrieve also for the customers. For the customers, now for the customers also, you see that's going to have the same details as the customer. So when you use the create table with this format, like it's going to inherit everything from the other table. So like you're trying to create a new table, but then you're going to use the content from the other one. So it's going to have everything. In fact, we shall try to demonstrate how to create a new one. Like we shall have a table that has some data. We learn how we can be able to create a copy of it with the same logic that I have used here. On the data definition, I said that I want to discuss how to create the table with the constraints. I want us to understand also how to add in the constraints when you're trying to create the table, even before we come to providing the data to it, like inserting the data to the table. So I want us to talk about the constraints, or even before the constraint, let me talk about the alter. Alter is also another language under the data definition. Now remember the comments, these are the basic things, like these are like just the information you want to explain your code, or maybe let's say you want to just explain the code. Let's say you're collaborating with other person, maybe you want them to understand what the code is going to do, even without them investigating, or maybe going through the code base to understand what it does. Like that comment can help them know what that program is going to do. So comment, these are just some notes that the programming language is going to ignore. I said that whenever you're writing a program, that programming language is going to act as a tool that is going to act as the mediator between with the humans and the machines. So the programming language is going to convert it in the way the computer will be able to understand. Then once it understands, then it will be returning now the response, or maybe if it was just to execute something, it's going to do that. Now, when you use a comment, then it's like you're trying to tell programming language to ignore it. So it will not send it to the backend, to the machine, so that it can be able to translate it, or maybe try to execute it. So it will ignore it. So a programming language is going to ignore it. Now, comments in Python, comments in SQL, you begin with the two hyphens like that. Then you can say this is a comment. This is a comment. Now you can write anything. Somebody is a comment, then your program there at the bottom, perhaps I could say this one. Let me write here. Now I'm not writing here on notebook, because on notebook that is on notebook that's a Python IDE. I'm not sure if it will work. Let me try again. On the notebook, let me run here. Okay, it is working, yeah, provided you have begun with the magic command. But the basic IDE for SQL is the Workbench, only that we are trying to learn it step by step. That's why we're using the notebook. In fact, you don't have to use it here on the notebook. But then now for teaching you guys, I want you to understand all the code. That's why we're doing it here step by step. So I want to talk about alter the table. The alter command, these are used to add, delete, or even modify the columns in the existing tables. Now, for example, let's say we wanted to add in another column to the customer table. So what we'll be doing is to use first of all, let's begin with the magic command. Then we'll say alter table, then the table name. Now you notice that here you don't need to specify the database, because here at the top we have established the connection with the database. So here at the bottom we can just specify the table without the database. So here we'll say customer, and then in this customer I'm going to use another command called add. I want to add now a new column. Then I will need to specify the column name. Remember, don't forget that when you're trying to create a column, it needs to have what? It needs to have the data type also. Like those are the must parameters you need to have when you're trying to create what? A column in a table. So maybe I can say the address, maybe, and then I can have, for example, age. Let me say age. Age is a number. So age, since it's a number, the data type here should be an integer. So I'll use int, then I can terminate my statement like that. So this command is going to alter the customer table, and it's going to alter by doing what? By adding a new column called age, which its data type is an integer. So when I run, you can see it's saying data. Okay, of course we haven't provided any row, but okay, any data in the rows. That's why I can see 0 row were affected. But then when I come back to the customer, you'll notice that a new column has been added called age. Yeah, so basically that's how you can be able to add it. And also, how do you remove once you have added? Still, you'll be using the alter command, or alter depending on how you pronounce it. I'm going to use the alter command, and this time I'm going to use what? A drop. Now to drop is like you're trying to delete. Now remember, drop has been used 3 times here. We used the drop on dropping the database, deleting the database. Also we use the drop to delete the table, and then now we're using what? The drop under the alter to do what? To drop a column. So here I'll say drop, and then now you'll need to explicitly specify what you're trying to drop. Remember, anytime you are running the drop, like drop the table, you are to specify what kind or what kind of the instance you're trying to drop or delete. For example, if it is a table or a database, or now this time a column, so you need to specify explicitly, specify what you're trying to delete. In this case, it is a column. Now the column that we want to delete, perhaps let's say the address under this under there. Yeah. So let's try to delete this address in the customer table. So I will say drop column, then column name is the address. So when you're trying to delete it, you do not need to specify the data type, because once you specify the column, it already has the data type, so you don't need to add in that parameter of the data type. You only use it when you're trying to create the table. So here it's going to drop. Now when we run this one, you'll see it's not going to have the address. It has been deleted. Deleted. So the drop is to delete. Now how do you modify a column? Remember, we have so far talked about on how you can be able to add in a new one, how you can delete, but then what about modifying the existing one? Then remember, when you are trying to modify an existing one, you cannot change the column name. Remember, if you want to change a column name, it's like you're trying to add in a new one, so you need to use what? The add. But then if you want to modify the existing column, you'll be changing the data type or other constraints that I will be talking about later. So let's say we want to change the data type of we wanted to change the data type of the customer ID to be an integer, or maybe even a string, although we don't have the data here to test. But you remember the content, like for example, this data type, these are things behind the scene. But I think we can be able to check the data types via this platform here. Like when I click on this customer, and then I click on this, I think gear icon or maybe the information here, this information here, you'll be able to see that's going to tell me the kind of data type each column has. Like when I go to the columns, you can see the customer ID is an integer, first name is a variable character, maximum 200 number of characters, then last name variable character, then the age is an integer. Now what if I wanted to change the data type of the customer ID to be a variable character or maybe a fixed character? Then you'll be using what? Modify, and then you specify what are you trying to modify. You need to specify the column you're trying to modify. Then when you say for example, let's use the customer ID. Now on the customer ID, you will need to specify also what new constant you want to add or what new data type you want to provide. So in this case, we want to make it a variable character. Then perhaps the maximum characters to be, let's say 20 characters. So when I will run this one, then this other side, you notice initially it was an integer, but then when I will reload here, I don't know how I can refresh. Let me refresh, click here. You can see it's now a variable character. It's now a variable character. If I want to change it back to an integer, then I'll just say here int. Then it's going to go back to the integer. When I refresh this other side, it's going to change from variable character to an integer. And I remember this one can only work if you do not have the data. Like assuming that you had an integer, like let's say, no, if you had like the strings like ABCD, you know, you cannot convert ABCD to a number because these are different data types. So, but you can convert, for example, an integer to a string. Yeah, a string, but then you cannot convert a name to a number directly. So when you'll be having the records in your table, when you'll be changing it, you need to be mindful of the content it has, because you'll need to address the existing content first, of which you'll be talking about those contents in a few, especially when you'll be inserting the records to the table. So far we have learned about the alter command, and we have learned that you can add, you can delete, and also you can modify the existing columns. So that's clear. And the other thing that I want us to talk about is okay, let me talk about the inserting, because there are some concepts that we are going to talk about them, but it is easier for us to be able to know how the constant is affecting the records by learning how to insert the record. Now remember, inserting the record is under the data manipulation language, only that I'm trying to use it here to make you understand some of the DDL command, the content that you'll be using when you're trying to create the table. So I'm going to use an insert command so that I can insert the records. I can insert the records to a table. So in this case, I want to insert the records to the, let me first of all confirm the data types. If yeah, the data type is an integer. So once again, I'm going to use the command insert, but don't forget to use the magic commands if you're on SQL. If you're on Workbench, remember you don't need to provide these. You don't need to provide the magic command. You just write it here directly, and it's going to run without an issue. But then since we are using it on the notebook, we are beginning with this decorator so that the SQL will work here. So I'm going to say here insert, then into, and then you specify the database. No, the table you want to insert it. Remember, we had already established the connection with the database. So ours here is just to specify the table because it's already aware of the database. Database has already been selected on the connection establishment. So here I will specify the table that I want to insert into it. This is customer. This is the customer table, and then I'll need to specify the columns. If you will not specify the columns, it will assume that you already know the structure of the columns, so you need to provide it in that way. Now let me in fact do that, and then I'll come to specifying the columns later. So like once you specify the columns, you need to also specify the values you're trying to provide into that column. Now for us, we already know here we have what in the customer we have the customer ID, the first name, last name, and then the age. In fact, let me see. Okay, let me just so you need to say values, and then the values you need to, because there are many, you will need to provide them in a tuple in these brackets. Then the first one was the customer ID, it was an integer, so let's say it's 1, then a comma. The second column was what? The first name. Let me just use the exact name, first name. The other one was last name. Then the other one was age, I believe. Age, yeah, age. No, sorry. Now these are the data. These are the data. For example, I can say James. Now James, because these are text, should be in quote. You need to write them in quote, either single or double quote, either of them. So you need to provide them in quote. Now these are the actual values. So I can say, for example, Smith, and then our age, for example, let's say 20. So when I will run this one, is going to insert those records. You can see now one row was affected. Now when I try to run this code, the select this one, you can see now I have on the customer, this one, you can see now I have this record inserted. In fact, let me just have it here at the bottom so that I can always be referring to it easily instead of like going back here at the top. So let me try to create an SL here at the top. Yeah, so we have provided what these records. Now if I will run it again, I'll be able to see another record inserted, but then it will be like creating a new one. So let me try to at least change the number to 2. Then for example, I can say here Mercy, and then maybe 21, and then when I will run it, then a new record has been inserted. So now we have 2 records, number 1, then number 2. So basically that's how you do it. That's how you insert the records to the table. But then the thing is that I wanted to talk about the constraints. I come back to this insert in detail, like in a few, so that you'll be able to understand the usage. But then I want to talk about the constraints. What are the constraints? I said earlier, constraint is like the rules or maybe a restriction that you'll be creating on your table, such that when someone will be adding out the records, they will need to follow that. They will need to adhere to the constraints or those rules that you have set, such that if you do not follow it, then the table will raise, the database will raise a integrity constraint. You haven't followed what was instructed there, so it will not accept that kind of the data. And this is the syntax for the constraint, like a way to add in the constraint. Now remember, the constraint must come after the data type when you're trying to create the table. Now first of all, let me delete the other table that we had already created, the customers. Now this one we have already provided some records to it. I don't want to, in fact, let me just drop it. Let me just drop all the tables so that we can now create with the constraints to demonstrate the constraints. Let me just drop it. Drop table, and the table name is customer. Customer, and then when I will run it, it is dropped. So there's a syntax drop should be dropped. You know, when I talk and type, sometimes I usually have this issue. I can write something else. And then also the customers, so that I don't have anything like this table. So if I try to run this select, it's going to tell me that the table does not exist. So this is totally fine. So I want us to create a new table, that table, but now with the constraint. With the constraint, I say that when you are trying to create a table, the constraint must come after the data type. After the data type, and first of all, let me delete this so that you can, yeah. So after the data type of which this, like this integer or this variable character, these are what we call the data type. So now after, for example, this, I want to add in a constant on this custom ID, and maybe the constant that I want us to begin with is the not null. I want us to begin with the not null, and the not null does not allow you to provide to insert records to that that in that table without by missing okay, if you miss some other fields, like for example if you forget to provide some field on a column that has the constant, then it's going to give you a validation error. So I want us to begin with the not null. So I say that the constant comes after the data type. In this case, the data type is int. So I'm going to say not null. And also remember the data type also come after the column name. So it's column name, then the data type, and then now the constraint. So in this case, not null. Now this not null is a constraint that does not allow you to insert any record to your table if you miss it. Remember, okay, let me first of all do this. Let me try first of all to create without the constant, that, and you'll see how it's going to work. So I've created that table. I want to insert the records to it, but then now let me specify the column that I'm going to insert the records to it. I'm going to insert. Now if you want to miss some column, then you need to explicitly specify the column that will be providing the data to it. So in this case, I can say, for example, first name, let me say first name, a first name. You know, it's not case sensitive, but then it's good something to be just first name, then also the last name, and maybe address. We can even leave it at that. So in this case, when I'll provide this information like this way. I'll just say I'll only provide the first name and the last name. I'll delete this other one. Now if I will run this one, I'm not going to get an error. If I try to retrieve it, like there's that command I think we have deleted, and the retriever, maybe let's say select all from customer, the table we have just created, customer. So when I will run this code, then you can see it's giving me, okay, basically none is not an SQL data type. It is null. It's null, only that we're using the Jupyter Notebook. Now when you go to the Workbench, and then let's refresh this other side. When you run, you'll see it's telling you null. Null is like a missing, an empty record there. So we don't have information on the customer ID. We don't have information on the address because there was no constraint there to instruct a person to provide those information. Now let me again drop it, and then let me drop it, and I'm going to add in now the constraint. Should be dot s. Let me add in now with the constraint after the name. I'm going to say, for example, not null. So when I add in this constraint not null, now earlier it was working well, but then now when I will run this code, I'm going to get here an error. I'm going to get here an error that field custom ID, specifically custom ID where we have provided the constraint, does not have a default value, which means that if you're not providing a value to it, and you should have provided a default value there. If you'll not be explicitly providing a new value to it, then an option could be you provide a default value to it, so that even if you miss it, it's going to use that default value. But then now, since we don't have either of those, we're getting this error. So there will be no record that will be inserted to that table because of that constraint. But then, like, once I just provide it custom ID, and then I will not get that error. For example, I say 1, or yeah, let me say 1. So when I will do it this way, then when I will run here, you can see now I'm not getting the error, and then it has been inserted successfully. But then, since we don't have the constant of this column, the address, this one it allows. So basically, the not null, as you can tell, does not allow you, or maybe it enforces a column not to accept the null values. So that is the null constraint, and the other constraint is the unique constraint. Now, again, I'm going to delete it because I just want to use that table for demo. It already has this code. I don't want to repeat it. Let me drop it. And then I want us to add in another constraint to learn about another constraint called unique. Well, now, what is a unique constraint? Like the unique constraint will not allow you to repeat the data. For example, let's say you have ID number 1. Let me say unique. So for example, if you have a data, let's say it's number 1, ID number 1, so it will not allow you to add in another ID number 1. You'll have what? The constraint. You'll have the that unique constraint. So again, let me run this code. Let me run this code. If I try to run it again, I'll get what? The error, the integrity error. There's a duplicate entry. Now let me do away with this constraint first, and you'll see how it's going to accept. Now without the constraint, let me create again. I'll need to drop it first, and then let me create. Now you notice when I will run this code, even multiple times, I'm not getting any error. I'm not getting error. I'm having repetition of that one. And then when you try to check here, you'll see several instances of 1. But if I will drop it and add in now the constraint here, the not null constraint, the unique constraint, and then I try to run this code, the first one is going to accept, but when I will run it again, it's like I'm trying to run the same code, this one to insert the same record here. I get what the constraint, like you can see here, duplicate entry 1. There's another 1 here, so it's giving you this error. So the unique constraint does not allow you to do it. It makes sure that all the values that you're trying to provide in that column are different. They are different. So this one works similar to another constraint that we are going to learn next, called the primary key. So a unique constraint, first of all, does not allow you to provide a duplicate, and also does not allow you to provide a null. Like, it must have a value, and that value must be very unique. It shouldn't be null, and then at the same time, it should not be the same as the other one that exists already. So that is a unique constraint, and it's going to work similar to the other constraint that I want to talk about, called the primary key. So basically, the primary key constraint, it has two constraints in one. It has the not null and then the unique. What do we mean by that? It does not allow you to enter a record with an empty data on a specific column that has that constraint, and then at the same time, it does not allow you to repeat the same value in another record. Like, you cannot repeat entries. It will not allow you to have the duplicates, and that is very key, especially for the scientists, or maybe that engineers. You not want to struggle a lot on the cleaning. You can do that on the data collection. So basically here, I will add in now that constant called primary key. So when I will add this record, okay, like when I create this table, now when I will run this code, this one is going to run well the first time. Then when I will run it again, You notice now I'm getting what? This error we were getting when we were using the unique, The unique constraint earlier, that you cannot have a duplicate entry. So you can tell the unique constraint is applied here. And another constraint that I talked about that this primary key is going to have is the not null constraint. So when I will run this one, I'll get that error that it was telling us. There's no default value for the customer ID column. So when I will run this one, you can see field customer ID does not have a default value. So you can tell this primary key, it has what? Two constraints, the not null and the unique. So that's the primary key. And where is the primary key used? So primary key used in the event, for example, you want to link it to another table. If you want to link it to another table, you'll be referencing that primary key with a key called foreign key. Now let me use an example like here in Kenya. When you are trying to create a KRA pin, you will need to have a national ID. So a national ID has a unique number, which is very specific for each and every person. So if you go to the KRA portal, you want to create a PIN. Now you'll be providing that ID. So in that KRA portal, when you provide that ID there has been used as a reference to your national ID, of which your national ID, it has your information like the address and other things. But then on your KRA portal, you will just be providing that PIN. No, the ID, then it's going to populate other fields. So you're just referencing that ID number, then it's going to retrieve all the other information. So we'll be creating the tables. And sometimes you don't want to have all the fields in the same table, no, all the columns in the same table. You might want to split. For example, if it's a customer table, you can have a customer which has the customer details, and then later you can have another table called maybe the orders the customer has been made. So these orders are for a customer, but they are in different tables. So you can link that order to a customer through a primary key foreign key relationship. So a primary key are used to create unique instances of data, so that you can be able to reference to it later. So that's one use case of the primary key. As you can tell, that key will be very unique for every person, similar to the national ID. That ID is very, very unique to each and every person. So once you have the ID, you are able to access individual information about that specific person, like it will be not for any other person. So that's the primary key. Let me talk about the foreign key. Now you need to have the primary key for you to be able to reference it via the foreign key. So here on the customer, we have this data here. Let me try to add in. Let me try to make, for example, number 2. So as you can tell, okay, I forgot to add in the comma here. As you can tell, I have how many records I have here? 2 records inserted to the customers table. So I want to create a new table here, maybe called, I will call it orders SQL. This is just a magic command. SQL, then I'll say I want to create a table, and then the table I'm creating here is called orders. Orders. I'll not need to reference the database because I had established the connection earlier. So I'm creating these orders. Then now, since it's a table, it needs to have the columns. So maybe I can have the order ID. I will add in the data type, which is an integer, but then on this one it should be also unique and also not null. So maybe I can give a primary key to it, and then it can also have the order number. Let me just say order number, because you can have the same order. Okay, like a different order ID, but then you can have the order number, which could be same to someone else, so we will not add in that constant on it. So let's say order. Okay, or maybe let me just say order item. Order item. Order item, and then order item should be a character. So I'll be using the variable character. Max to be, let's say, even 200 characters. And the other thing I can now use, because an order should belong to a customer. Like as a customer is trying to make an order. For example, it will be a person who will be making an order. Let's say they want to shop or maybe to buy a smartphone from an e-commerce system. So it's a person who is trying to make that order. And how do you track that person? That person is another table called customer table. So the customer table is going to record details about the customer. So in this case, I'll be referencing that customer via the key that I have just talked about, called the foreign key. So in this case, I will need to first of all provide the column name, and I'll say that the structures, or maybe the procedure, what do we call it, the syntax. When you are trying to create a table, it must have what the data type. Although this customer ID we know is going to reference the customer's table, but then to follow the rule, when you're trying to create the table here, we just need to repeat adding now that data type. Then now I will add in now the constant here at the bottom. So here I will say okay, first of all, this is a table we have just created here, and then now after it's created here at the bottom, we are going to say primary key in brackets. We can specify the primary key. That's why we had to create it earlier, so that we can be able to add it on these brackets to specify what is a primary key. So the primary key here, it is a customer key, customer ID from another name, from another. Okay, wait. No, here we want the foreign key. When it is in the orders, it is called a foreign key because it is referencing another one. So I'll say here foreign key customer ID, and then you need to specify it is referencing what. It is referencing what. So here you write this parameter references from the customers table, customer table, and then the customer ID there. Remember, the customer ID here on the orders table, this is a foreign key. But then it's going to reference a primary key from the other table, the customer, the one that we have just created. So, like for you, if you want to reference, if you want to use a foreign key, it must reference an existing primary key. If the primary key doesn't exist, then you cannot reference something that doesn't exist. Like I said, for example, you want to create an KRA pin, you cannot reference an ID that does not exist. It will give you an error. So when I will run this code, it has been created. Now when I will try to insert now the records here, let me just say insert into, let me just copy this code so that I'll not repeat a lot. So I'm going to have this is order ID, then order item, then lastly it was customer ID. So these are the columns. So let me say let's say the order ID is number 1, then an item, perhaps it's a laptop. Then we need to reference a customer that exists. In our case, we only have how many customers? 2. So I have to ID number 2. So if I try to reference number 3, we know it doesn't exist. We'll get what? An error. Okay, first of all, I will need to use the correct. I will need to use the correct. Did I run this code? Okay, on the orders, I think it should be orders here. I forgot to change here. Should be order, not customer this time. Now, this is the issue of copy pasting. You need to be very keen. Yeah. So still there's a syntax error. Let me just confirm. Is it orders? It is orders here. Orders, not order. Yeah, so this is the error that I was expecting. You can see it's telling me that cannot add or update a child raw foreign key constraint users orders like this one inserting to Nini because that Nini doesn't exist. We only have up to number 2. So you need to reference a customer that exists, and in our case we have up to how many? Let's say 2. If you say 2, that customer exists. You can see now I'm not getting the error. If I try to retrieve it using the data query, but then now this time I'll be using which table? The orders table. Orders. Oh, sorry. Yeah, orders tables. Orders tables. So when I will run it, you can see now I have this customer. Like this customer exists, and you can have. Okay, you cannot like you can reference. Okay, you can be able to reference the same customer for multiple orders. So remember, on the primary key, you cannot have the same name, the same customer, like it must be unique. And also, it does not allow the nulls. But then now, as a foreign key, you can be able to even repeat the same thing. Now, let's try to understand it this way. Like the same customer on an e-commerce can make different orders. For example, a same customer can purchase a laptop. I can make an order for a laptop. Then later, the same customer can make an order for smartphone. Then in future, can make an order for a washing machine or whatever it is. So it's still the same person, but then the orders are different. That's why here, the same person, I can make like a order number 2 here without getting the error. Yeah, so when I will run here, I can see now that it doesn't have those constants like the unique and the not null. Okay, not null is automatically doesn't allow because you cannot reference an existent customer. And also it allows the duplicates because the same customer can make multiple orders. So this is the foreign key. You'll be referencing what exists. Now there's something that maybe I could just tell you in the event, for example, you wanted to use the alter. So far we've been learning how to create those constraints when you are trying to create a table. But then what if you have already created a table, it didn't have the constraint, then later you wanted to add in the constraint. So let me try to create the table. All right, so let me create another table here just for demo to show you how you can be able to affect the original. For example, I can call it even the users. Let me create a table called users. Let me create a table called users and say create a table, and then the table name is users, and then the columns I can have, for example, the user ID, and then the data type here should be an integer int, and then I can have the first name, last name. In fact, this one let me just copy from this other table. Let me just copy these details because they are pretty much the same. Now this table I have created, like when I run it, is going to create this table without any constraint. So I wanted us to assume the scenario where you already have a table but doesn't have the constraint, but then you wanted to add in the constraint. Now remember, first of all, for it to apply, let's say you wanted to add in the constraint of the not null. Let's say you had the nulls already. So this one is going to have an issue. You will have a validation issue because it will be asking you, for example, to address the existing one, because when you're adding a constraint, it's going to affect the entire column. Let's say that column already has the nulls, then it's going to have what? issues. But then now, since this one we have already created, only that it doesn't have the data, so now when you try to modify it using the alter under the DDL, the data definition language, then this one it will work. So we are going to use the alter. Let me say alter or alter table. In this case, users. This case it is the users table. Users table, and then now this time I'm going to use the add. Now instead of the column, I'll be saying the foreign key. Foreign key. Okay, now no, not foreign key actually. It's like the constant. They have just like a foreign key, just one of the constant. In fact, let me make it not null. Not null. Now, in fact, let me go this other side so that I can see it well. When I refresh this other side, then there's these users, and there's these users. When you try to click on this information, and then you go to the columns, you can see there are no constraints at all. Now, what I will do, I'm going to add in now the constraint like at the not null. Now, I'll need to specify the column that I want to add in that constraint to it. So, the table that I want to add in the constraint to it, it is not the table actually, but then the column that I want to add in the constraint to it, it is the not null. I want to add in that constraint maybe to the user ID, so that this one must be, I must have a value when you're trying to add in the record, like it will not accept the nulls. So we're going to say add, and then the constraint, in this case constraint is the not null. Then now the so I'm getting this I'm getting that error. Maybe there's a syntax error that I will need to also. Now in this case we will need to use we will need to use the modifier. Remember there's adding. Now this one we already done. Let's see. Add consent. Then the user table. User ID. The user ID. Not null and the user ID. So I'm getting this error. Outer table. Not null user ID. So actually there is a syntax error. Actually in this case I think I will need to use the modify instead. Let's try to use the modify. Modify, and then specify the column. Now here when you're trying to use the modify, remember you need to specify the column, then the data type. In this case it is an int, and then the constant not null. This is like we're trying to just create a table, a column, new column. It's like, okay, we'll be using the modifier. The modifier accept. Now let's try to add in now the constraint of the let's try to add in now the content maybe on the first name also. Let's try to add in the first name, but then at this time I want us to use a different constraint, maybe the unique constraint. Let's try to modify using the unique constraint. So this one I'll use the add. I don't know why the not null it wasn't accepting on the other one. On the other one you had to use the modify, but then now let's try to use the add here, and then here I'll just say I will say on this one I'll say unique constraint, add, then a constraint, say unique, unique, then I'll specify the column that not the column, but then the the column that I want to add in the constraint to it. In this case, I want to add in now that unique constraint on the first name. Yeah, this one accepts. This one accepts. So now in future, if you want to use it, then you'll need to follow or adhere to the rules for the constraint. Remember, you can use the add or modify, and then you specify the column. In the event, for example, you wanted to update the already created table. Remember, you'll be using the alter command, of which is still under the ddl command. And then maybe there are several constraints, but then the last one maybe I can try to add here. It is the auto increment. Maybe we can try that one, or maybe even the check, and then we will stop there. Okay, no, we'll not stop there, but then we'll go to something else apart from the constraint. We'll talk about some other commands like the aggregation and all that. So let me say, let me delete the order. Orders, I think it's orders, yeah, order or orders. So now I've deleted it. But then now the constant that I want to add here is called the auto increment. The auto increment, I want to make this an auto increment field so that I will not need to specify the ID, for example, 1, 2, 3. It's going to automatically increment. Like when you just run, it's going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, and that. So you not need to specify the values. I will not need to specify the values. So I can write it there, auto increment, auto underscore increment. So auto underscore increment, auto underscore increment to the order ID. So when I will run this one, I'm not sure if I'm going to get the error. And correct the table. There can only be one auto column. There can only be one auto column. So basically this one will need me to first of all add in another constraint. Maybe I can add in the not null before the auto increment. So I'm going to add here the two constraints here, the not null, then auto increment, or unique. Let me use unique. Let me use unique. Let me use unique on this other ID. Yeah, so this one is going to accept. So I've used first of all the unique before the auto increment, which means that when it will be doing the auto increment, you want to make sure that the auto increment value is very unique. So now in this case, I will not need to specify I will not need even to specify the order ID is going to automatically increment from 1 to 3 and so forth. So when I run this code, even if I run it how many times, it will be updating. It will be going from 1, 2, 3, 4 without me specifying here. Like when I run here, you can notice it has gone from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like automatically. I didn't do that. So this is the auto increment constraint. And then maybe lastly, we can have the default. Then on this time, the same, the default. Remember, if you wanted to add in now the default here, you can use what? You can use on the creation or maybe on the alter. But then let me drop it and then try on creation. Now the address, on the address, I'll want it to use. No, not I have deleted the wrong table. It should be the customer. Okay, yeah, basically on the customer, on this customer's table, let me drop it first. Let me drop the customer table. Let me see if there's a command there earlier. There's that table. Drop, then customers. This table, customer. So I've dropped the customer table. Now, once I've dropped, I want to add in another constant called default. Now, default, instead of like giving you null, the event, for example, you don't provide the data there, is going to use that in default value. So in this case, I want to add in the default here on the address, so that you can use, for example, a country like, let's say, Nairobi, Kenya, or whatever it is. So I want to add in now that default value. So I'll just say default. Now after this data type of the address, so default, then you'll provide now the value there. Now since this is a variable character right here in quotes, then I can say, for example, Nairobi, Kenya, or any other address, Nairobi, Kenya. So when I run this code, and then so this is the customer, I want to insert now the records to it. Remember, address is not included here, but then when I will run it, okay, because of the consent 3, when I will run it, and then at this other side, you will notice that the address has been automatically filled, automatically because of that default value. So the default value, like, it's going to be like, instead of having the nulls, the default is going to be to replace, like in the event, for example, you have the nulls. And the use case of this one is like, for example, let's assume you are in an event, and let's say you are here in Kenya, and let's say majority of your users or maybe the members are Kenyan, so you not want them to be maybe specifying their nationality unless you see there's another person who is not the nationality is not Kenya. That's where now you can provide now the country or maybe the address information. But then for the rest, you might assume that they belong to Kenya, so you not need to fill that thing like all the time. So that's the advantage of the default. And I might want also to add in the default on this orders table, but then at this time I'm going to add in now the default via the alter command. Is it orders? Oh, it was already deleted earlier. Yeah, it was already deleted. So now let's try to create it, but this time I'm going to add maybe the order item. Let's assume that most of the items that have been bought there are smartphone. So I will add now. Now, okay, this one has already been created. So what I want is to alter. So let me first of all create it, and then now let me add in another column. So this one has already been created. Created. So, and then maybe you have some values in the inside. We have run this code, so there's that value there. When you run, we have our number one laptop. Now I want us to add in the to use the alter table. So remember, when anytime you're trying to alter that constant. Okay, first of all, let's use the magic command and say alter, then a table, then the table, in this case it is orders, and then I'll now use the alter again column. Now remember, we are altering the table, then also the column. So again, I'll use the alter, but then now the column, in this case I want to alter the order item to have that constraint. So alter the order item, and then I will be using the set default to a new value. Maybe you can just say the default value there, it will be, for example, let's assume it's iPhone 17, let's say Pro Max. So when I add this information and I miss to provide this part of the of the laptop. Let's assume that I'm just specifying it for customer number 1. So when I run this code, it's going to, first of all, the auto increment is going to be on the auto increment is going to be on the order ID, and then now the default is going to be on the order item. Then now we are referencing what the customer. So when now we run this code, and then first of all, I'm getting this error because maybe the customer does not exist. We're trying to reference a customer who doesn't exist, the customer ID number 1. So let me try to check if truly the customer exists, and it is true, the customer number 1 doesn't exist. So let's try to say number 2 or number 3. Number 3 is it. So when I will run this code, even how many times, you remember I've just specified the customer, but then now when I will run now this retrieval, you can see now I have iPhone 17 Pro Max, and then this auto increment. So this default has been implemented here. So this is on the alter or alter. So that's how you can be able to modify. Now the very last constant that I want to talk about is the check. Now the check, you can use it in the event, for example, you can use the check in the event, for example, you wanted to let's say you wanted to restrict, for example, the age or maybe some certain numbers to be inserted into the records. So basically, in that case, you will need to okay, when you having, for example, a check, let me show you the example. Let's assume that we have a column called age. I don't know if there's a column that has the age in it. Let me just try to create a new one here. A new one, maybe I can say students. Students, and then maybe I'll say student ID. Student ID, student ID, and then maybe you can make it even a primary key, and I'll add here another column called age. Let me add in another column for age, and then age is an integer, but then I'm going to add in the check. I'm going to add in here check. Okay, first of all, if you want to add in now that check, you need to have first of all the column. So I will add in now that column first, then here at the bottom, because we need to specify on which there's a function that I'm going to use there that will require you to specify the column. So I'll say check. Now begin by writing the column name first. Then here I'm going to say check. Then the reason I created it earlier so that I can be able to access it here at the bottom. So I can say, for example, age. Is the age, let's say, above 18, or let's say above or equal to 18 years. So in this case, you will be okay. There's an error. There's an error. There's an error. I want to identify where the syntax error is. The syntax error is, so student is the table, create table, and then oh yeah, there are those spaces. Maybe trying to check on those spaces. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the spaces. So we have the oh yeah. Also, this should be check, not change. Yeah, check. Yeah. So when I will run it, let me see. Yeah, you can see now it is working. So now when I will be providing out those information, let me find that code so that I'll just change the values. No, there is no insert. Okay, let me just use this one. The reason I do this is to avoid like repeating the same things all the time. So here I just change it to student. From customer, I'll just make it student, and then I hear from the customer. I just change it to student. Now the student is our primary key, and then now we have their first name. We have the first name. We have the address is going to use at default. Let me also add the age. So age, for the age, if I will try to use an age, let's say less than 18, for example, let me say here 17 years, I'm going to get here an error. I'm going to get this error. The check is violated. So you cannot, like, it will not allow you to add in, for example, the age below this 18. Remember, it can be even the characters or whatever it is. So you might be checking, for example, if this has this one in it. Let's say you wanted to do some check if you want to see, like, someone is trying to provide some code on your database. You know, someone can inject something that's going to corrupt the entire system. We call it the SQL injection. So maybe let's say you wanted to check, like, if that entry has this particular pattern. You can be able to also check on the characters. In this case, it's just integers to check, for example, the age. But then, if, for example, if it's 18 or 18 and above, it's going to work well. Now, guys, basically this is the last on the constraint. So far, we've been talking about the data definition. Now, I want to talk about the we want to advance on the actually from this DML, so that we can talk about some other things. And in this case, I want us to create another table, and I want us to create another, maybe I can create another database for the usage of that. And then maybe I can create a database for the employees. Create, then oh, sorry, it should be magic command here. SQL, and then the magic, create database. Then the database name here, I can call it employees. Now, so this is the database has been created, but then I have some table that I'm going to use. I'm going to use it here. Let me try to close this thing so that it may not be too much here. Just try to delete most of them. I am going to click here on the employees, and then now here on the tables, I'm going to right click. If you have the existing table, I'm going to right click, then I'm going to click here on the table data import wizard. Remember, there are several options on how you can be able to do that, but then this is the easiest way. You select the database, you open it, then on the table, you're going to right click, then you'll use this option called the table data import wizard, and then you're going to click on the browse. Then let me find this there's some data here. So these are the CSV files that I want to insert. So let me begin with this employee. I'm going to select it. Then I'm going to insert. So this is the employees table. This is the employees table. There's no existing one. Then I'm going to create. So these are the columns with their constraints. Now the text, these are like the data type. These are like the data type. And then let me go to the next, and then next. Then it's going to import them. So it's already imported. And then I will also import the other one. And this one is already there. So I will provide these data sets here. Okay, you'll get it here. You'll go to the materials, then I will upload here. After this recording, I will upload these materials. So like, you'll go to the materials tab, then I'll be able to download this material so that you can use it for demo. So all of them, you'll be able to find it here. Now, if you're not enrolled, make sure that you have enrolled. It's www.nemtech.com. Then I go to this register, then enroll to these SQL courses, our free course. And in fact, there are some other things that I haven't mentioned that are included in the content. Make sure that you follow them. You're going to learn more about the SQL. Now, okay, let me also import the rest. Again, I'll click on the right click on the tables, then import table data wizard. Then at this time, I'll be using these orders. I'll be using the orders, then next, and then next, and then next, then next, and then next. Okay, finish. Then and then the other thing is the other table for the let me also browse. Then for the products, so I have this table also. Next, then I'm going to finish. Yeah, so all these records have been provided. So how do you check the tables you have? Now I think I will need to use, okay, I don't know if there's too much here, but then let's first of all begin by showing the tables. I remember there's a database we have created, and then I want us to show the tables. So we're going to begin with the magic command SQL, then the show table. Now we'll need to explicitly specify the database because we have another database for users. So in this case, we'll need to say show tables from the employees database that we created earlier. And then when you run, so these are the tables that we have created. And since you notice that it has some good number of records, if you want to retrieve the records, you can use what? Some few, you can use the commands. So let me just say, okay, like you can use a limit command that I'm going to also share with you. I'm going to tell you how to use it. So I'm going to use select, then all, and then from now, since it's not connected there at the top, I'll need to specify the employees. Then that's the database and also the employees table. Now we'll need to limit it. Like if you want to limit the number of records to be returned, then I use this command called limit. Then you can specify the number of records you want to limit from it being returned. So in this case, we want to limit it to 5. So you can see it has limit the returned results to 5. Yeah, so remember I will share with you this data so that you can be able to see. You can be able to also use it for the demo. Make sure that you are enrolled because I'm going to upload materials in the materials tab. On the materials tab, you'll be able to see this resource. I hope I will remember. If I will not remember, make sure that you comment it on the comment section so that I can do that. Now, the other thing is, the other one is orders table. So, like I just want us to remember, you need to always explore before you even do anything. You need to do the exploratory analysis, especially for the data analysts. They understand these things. But then this is just for learning SQL. We're not into data analysis at the moment. But then just understanding SQL, how to work with SQL. With MySQL. So the orders here, this is the order, these are the records it has. And then the other one was products. Products. Let's say products. Now, there's something that I want us to talk about before we conclude the SQL class or a course. I want us to talk about the aggregation. And then also we'll talk about the aggregation on group by. Then after the aggregation, we'll talk about the joins. We'll be able to understand how to join different tables. Yeah, so basically, these are the records, these are the tables I'm having, and it could be having much data. That's why we had to use the limit. Now the limit, assuming that you had millions of records, if you run it here, and for example, if you do not have the constant by default on the notebook, it might want to execute all of them, and when it runs, it's going to use the resources. So you'll find you might find the computer crashing due to lack of memory, or maybe like it will begin to misbehave because maybe the memory has been depleted. So whenever you're using with massive amount of data, make sure at least you're using the limit by default, so that it's going to restrict the number of records to be returned. So this limit command is just to restrict the number of records to be returned. So now I want us to talk about some aggregation function. The aggregation function, these are cumulative function, like a function that is going to affect several records, not just one record. These are functions that are going to affect several records, like in some cases the entire column. Let's say you wanted to do a summation of all the price for all the products here. So if you want to get a cumulative price, then that's what we call an aggregation summation, like we are trying to do some summation on the entire column. So that's one, that's an aggregation, like you're trying to aggregate everything. If you wanted to do an average, also still for this entire column, that is an aggregation. Let's say you wanted to find the maximum value, you will be aggregating the entire column. If you wanted to get the minimum or any other thing, those are aggregations. And we shall also talk about some count as well, some other commands. We are going to discuss them in a few. So I'll begin with whatever column here that has them. For example, the salary. Let me begin with the salary. And as we talk about the SQL, the selecting details. The select. Now, first of all, we've been using select, which selects is under the DQL, the data retrieval language, and the data retrieval language. But then the data query language, we use it to retrieve information from the table. Now, when you use this asterisk here, it means that you're trying to select all the columns there. You are trying to select all the columns. So if you want to for example, specify the number of columns, then you will, instead of saying the asterisk, you can specify the number of columns you want to return. For example, let's say we wanted to get the product ID. So we'll be writing here on the select, then the column name product ID, then maybe the product name, comma, then the category, So when I will run this one, it's not going to include the other ones unless you specify all the number of columns that will be included. Now this one is this is a product table, so I will need to use product table here. I will need to use the product table here because of these columns I'm trying to the employees, but then now the products table. So you can see now the few records have been returned. So if you wanted to specify all of them, then you can manually specify them or use a shortcut like asterisk, which stands for arbitrary, which means that you're trying to select all of them. You are not sure of the number of columns, you're just specifying all. All could be even one or two or all of them. So asterisk mostly stands for the arbitrary, which means you're trying to select everything that is in that. Every column that is in that table. You are not sure how many of them, but then every column that is in that table, in this case product, you are going to return all of them. So this is on the select, and remember other operations, you can be able to use them here. For example, let's say you wanted to know the unique categories there, then you can use the select, but then you'll be using distinct, and then you can specify the column where you want the results to be distinct from. So for example, if I will say category, then the result is going to just return distinct categories here. For example, I don't know how many categories, maybe let's say 10 records were affected. How many categories are there? But then what you will notice here is that you will be seeing unique instances. Okay. Where is it? Here. I was supposed to change here to 10. You can see still 5 records were affected, even though I've limited. In fact, let me remove the limit. So the unique categories in this one is 5. We have the electronics, furniture, office supplies, appliances, accessory. So we've used this distinct command to get unique instances of that are in that column. Like you can see, we're having electronics. Now, if you wanted to know how many categories and we are having duplicates here, you'll not be able to know how many main categories are there. But then now when you use the distinct on the select, you're able to know how many of the distinct categories are there. But then the purpose here is to understand the aggregation. Let's do away with the distinct first. So let's say we wanted to know this is products. Let's say we wanted to know the price, the total price there. You know, this price is numbers. So we wanted to know the price. So basically in this case, we'll be using what? Sum, but then we'll be summing for this entire column. So the command there will be is a function called sum. Now anytime you use a function, it must have the parentheses. So sum, then there's a parenthesis, then you will specify the column that you want to sum it. So this column, when you say, for example, price, you're going to sum the entire column. So when I will run, you notice that I'm getting this result. So it has done what? It has sum all the values here all the way to the bottom. It has done what? The summation of everything. But what you notice here, the column name here at the top is not making sense. Like, it's not good. Like, you might want to use something that's quite descriptive, because someone will just know that this is kind of a function. So in SQL, it has the capability to make this, to make an alias of something. What is an alias? An alias is like an AKA of something, or maybe a nickname of something. For example, let's say is maybe let's say you want to know a Kenya. Let's say there are two races. You have a white person, you have a black person, and then maybe a black person has a name, also a white person has a name. But for example, I can just say, for example, black guy come here, and maybe let's say white person come here. So when you say white, since there are just two people there, so that white person is used to refer to the name of that person. Maybe instead of saying, for example, Nehemiah or whatever other name, so someone has just say, for example, white person. Or maybe let's say someone could choose to refer you by maybe the black, okay, for not black actually, maybe the dressing code, or maybe the height. For example, they can call you Goliath, they can call you the thin person, or whatever way they want to refer to you. So those are just alias for you, the person you. For example, the person Nehemiah, you can choose to refer to him by the name, or by the height, or by the gender, or by the color, or maybe by the location where they come from, or maybe the race, or maybe the class. So whatever way you are trying to refer me is just the alias. It's just like the alias. So in this case, this sum price, you can provide the alias to it. So for example, we can say, for example, instead of it returning a sum price, we can have, for example, the total price. Let's try to say total underscore price. So instead of returning this sum, so this total price has stood there for it. So you can see now we are seeing total price instead of this sum price. So basically, when you use this AS, we're able now to see it. We're able now to see. Okay, like I somehow described instead of having a function there. So this is an aggregation, the sum. Then, for example, if you wanted to do the average, you'll be using this command called avg. In fact, let me use it in a new cell. Let's try to do the average price. So I'll say here avg. Remember, it's not sensitive to cases avg. I know you might have learned Python or whatever other language that are very sensitive to cases. So it is AVG. If you write it in small, it will still work. Then here I'll say average price so that it can be much semantic. So let me say average price per product, average price on an average. Maybe this is the price of a commodity of a product. It is 112. This is the average price. And then maybe you wanted to identify, for example, the minimum value, the minimum price. You can write their mean. So you can say here mean price. Let's say mean. So the minimum price here, it is 4 bob. A product will be costing 4 shillings. Then now the maximum you'll be using. Oh, by the way, I could have done the, okay, let me use a different cell. Like I don't want to edit, I should have used a different cell here instead. Yeah, let me run the average. Then now for the mean in a new cell. Remember, it is returning the scalars because when you're trying to get something like an average, just one value. So maximum, I'll change it to max. Max. Then here I'll change also to here maybe max price. Max price there. It is 1200. So that's the maximum. So all of these are aggregation. We're trying to do the aggregation. We're trying to aggregate them. You're trying to aggregate them. Now you can as well aggregate based on some grouping. Let's say here we have the products. We have the, like you can see, we have different type of products. Maybe you can try to aggregate to know maybe the total price per product per category. Let's say category pricing per category. So you'll be grouping maybe categories. Let's say electronics, and then I'll be getting, for example, the total price on individual category. So I'll be getting now the pricing, the total pricing, but based on the category. So that one will be using the grouping by aggregation, but then by grouping by. So how do you do that? So again, we are going to use here. Okay, let me still copy this one. Or let me just write here command like group by. Group by. Maybe here I can say aggregation. Normal aggregation. Aggregation is like a generalizing or maybe something like that. So I want us to maybe something find, for example, the total price. Let's say something like let's say price. Okay, we can use a sum. By the way, also on this one, we also have another one called count. Let me try to duplicate this one. Like basically count, you are counting the number of records. Like for example, you wanted to know how many products were there. So the products will be counting the number of records. Remember, when you're trying to do a count, it is not restrictive to the column because as you notice, for example, when this product ID it has one column, it will mean that it has one record. It means that also the product name also has the the row applies across the entire table. So if you are trying to count for whatever column here it is, it's going to give you the same result because you are doing a count. You are counting the number of rows. And if you are having one row on product ID, you'll be having also the same number of row on the rating. So on the count, you can use, it's not restrictive to whatever kind of a column you're trying to check on. So basically here, let me try to use a count. Remember, I'm coming back to the grouping by, but then let me first of all do a count. Count. This one count the number of rows. So let me say number let me say number of products products. Now this should be account. This should be account. You can see now the number of records there. The number of products there are 50. We have 50 products. In fact, if there are 50 products, you can even view them. They are not too much. But then now let's come back to the group by. So first of all, here we're trying to do the sum of the price. I can say here sum. Okay, let me say total price per category. So in this case, I will need to add in another column category here. I will need to add in another category here. So the one that I will be using to group, and the one that I will be using here to group. Yeah, so the one that we're using here to group. So when I will try to, okay, so basically in this case, you will need to write now the group by now after this form. After you have specified the table, now at the bottom here is where now you'll be writing out the group by. So I'll say here group by, then you'll specify what column you want to group by. So when you say you want to group by category, then it will be looking, for example, the categories like electronics or furniture, or all of them is going to group them, and then it's going to make it one instance. It's going to make like one category, like it's going to just say, for example, furniture, and then it's going to give you the total sum, the total price for that category. So when I will run this group by category, then you can see it's going to give me the total price by electronics. So what is happening here is that it's going to count, for example, electronics, like it's going to count, it's going to sum anywhere you see electronics, it's going to count. One, it's going to sum this one, it's going to sum also this value, it's going to sum this one, it's going to sum this one, all of them. Then it's going to give you one result, and then it's going to give you one result like electronics, and then the total value that it will have done the summation. Then it goes to the furniture, it's going to calculate, it's going to sum for all the furnitures, it's going to sum for all the furnitures. Then it's going to give you one record like furniture with the total summation that has been added for that furniture to get this one. So grouping by is like trying to do some the aggregation, but then on a grouped result, on a grouped data. So I remember I can use any other aggregation function, like for example, let's say you wanted to do the count to know how many categories were there. You can say count, and then here you'll be saying, for example, number of total, maybe let's say products, say no, number of products per category, so it will be returning how many products. You can see electronics, there are 22, then furniture there are 7, office supply there are 16. Now you can use another of the aggregation function that we had mentioned earlier on an aggregated result. Now also you need to make sure that the operation you're trying to use them makes sense. Like you cannot use sum on a text column. You cannot sum, for example, suppliers, for example, this text, because sum will not work on the text. But when you use a count on supplier, this one will work, because its work is just to count the number of records you are having there. So that's how you will go about them. Remember, there are some additional commands that are there on the LMS. The other thing that I want to talk about is the filter. How do you filter in SQL? Like in other languages, you can use, for example, if, else if, elif, or maybe else. In other languages, you'll be using elif or if. So those kind of conditions. It's like you're trying to check, you're trying to execute something, but then it must match a particular condition. So it's like some statement that only execute if it's true, if it has met the condition. So let me write here where So actually we'll be using a command called where, or let me just say here, filters or conditions. Filters, so conditions. So remember, everything here that I'm teaching you is available on our LMS. It's available on the LMS. Like I can see the where it is. Where is it? Now this one has more information, guys. Has more information. I can see there's a where filter here. Yeah, so there's where filter here. It's like you'll be writing the where, and then now the condition, and then now the examples is going to also give you the examples. Like this, I really like the LMS, and with the examples there, it's just quite nice and easy for a beginner to even understand. And you know, it's quite awesome. It's quite really nice and easy to understand, guys. So make sure that you also check out on the LMS. It has some very nicely done lessons, and also I talked about the insert, and you can see the syntax also. In case you didn't capture anything during the recording, make sure that you also go here. But then, since we are focusing on the video, let me just continue here with the filter. Now I say that this one you use it on the filter. I think this one I'll try to use a different table. I'll try to use a different table, like for example, is it orders? Let me okay, let me try to use the employees. So this is without the block. This is without the condition there. Only we are having this limit. We only have this limit. But then sometimes you might want to only see maybe the employees that belongs to this department only. So in that case, you'll be using what? You'll be using a command called where. You'll be using a where filter. So say, for example, where, and then you can say, let's try to use an example like a department. So where, for example, the department, then, for example, if you want to say you wanted to check specifically, you'll say is. You'll use now the equal operator, which means that is trying to check if the department matches the one that you are providing. For example, let's say the department is IT. So in this case, it's going to check. It's going to check if the department is IT. If it's IT, then it's going to be returned. So when you run here, you can see it has filtered the employees who belongs to this department, and they're almost everyone. When you go to, let's say, HR, okay, on HR, let's say how many of them are they? This one, there are 8, and then now you can do for any other. So this is just one example. Now, for example, if you wanted to use an integer, let's say you wanted to just check where employee ID is less than, maybe you wanted to know the old employees in that company. So maybe you can say, for example, where employee ID is less than. Maybe you can use the less than symbol, less than. For example, ID is less than, let's say 10. You wanted to know the old people there in that organization. They were first employed. So you can say, for example, less than 10. Then it's going to return the employees who are what? The oldest, you know, the oldest. Then you can do another thing. For example, you wanted to check if okay, like you can do for any other filter. Now, for example, let's say you wanted to look for Sarah. Let's say you wanted to look for like you are not sure if you have an email, like for example the Sarah here, or let's say Nelson. So what you will do, you can use a a filter command or a condition like the like. So in this case, you'll be checking here on the email. You'll be looking, for example, where the email, so you'll be using the word like. You'll be using the like. Now this is a wild card character, like. So basically this like is trying to check if it contains any of the match pattern. Now let me try to explain, let me use a different cell here to explain that. So what the like does, basically like you'll be using this percent symbol, and let's say you wanted to look, for example, something like name. Now when you'll begin with the word percent, then for example let's say James, or any other name, any other thing, any other character. For example, when you say you begin with the percent, in this case, this character is trying to check if that column or maybe if that record ends with. This one tries to check if it ends with that name characters you have specified. Now, if the percent is here at the start, no, if the character percent is here at the end, it will be checking if the records start with. And then now if you want to check if it's in between, it's not starting or ending that specific character, you will be using percent at the start and also at the end. So this one is going to check anywhere, not at the end nor at the start. Is going to check anywhere, provided you have that such pattern, that pattern. So for example, in this case, we can say, remember the email is a text field, so it should be in quote. But then now the character that I'm going to use here is percent. I want to look, for example, I have Nelson there anywhere. I remember here, I'm assuming that I'm trying to look if, where is it? Is Nelson? Okay, because I'm not sure even if the Nelson start or ends, so I will write here Nelson, then closing. So this one is going to return all the Nelsons that are there, or that is there. So you can see it's number 40, so I'm able to see the Nelson here. So if I will say it begins with, so I will remove this percent here. This one is not going to return anything. You can see nothing has been returned. But then since we know that the Nelson is also not at the end, by the way, it's not at the end. And when I begin with the percent, it's also going not to return. So, but then since it's in between, so I'll need to write the start and at the closing, because this Nelson here on the email is between these other characters. So you'll be using this percent symbol. Yeah, so this is just one of the conditions. Let's say you wanted to check the phone number, maybe 2 phone numbers. You can use the membership operator. Remember, these are just few of them. On our LMS, we have more of the conditions. But let me say for number, you wanted to look a range of items. So in this case, you can just use in operator. Say in, then you write here in parentheses, then of course that's the phone number. So maybe let's say you're trying to look for this particular phone number. Let's say this one, you want to return that one. Remember, this is a text. Is it a number? It is a text, because I saw the hyphen is a text. And then also this one, comma, this one. So this one will be using now the membership. So it's going to return if it matches. So you can see it has returned because the condition has been met. So basically, in a nutshell, remember the other thing, other operations that you can use on the where, like any condition. For example, you wanted to look, for example, if it contains, you'll be using the like. If you wanted to look, for example, if they belong to this department, but then you can also combine. Let's say you wanted to look for you wanted to look, okay, let me try to combine two conditions here, by the way. Let's say you wanted to look for the job title, maybe the job title. Let's say job title is I'll be using the equal operator here. Then let's say the job title is HR manager is a text, so I'll write in quote. And now whenever you use the word and, it means that you're trying to check if both of the conditions are true. So for example, you're trying to look, let's say you're trying to look, the job title is the job title maybe HR manager, and then and department, and let's say, and maybe let's say for example first name, or let me just say for example city and city, and city is let's assume this one. So it's going to return all the condition, all the record that has been met, that condition. So in this case, you can see it's only return this one, returning this one. If I were to use, for example, let me see how many others. Let's say senior developer, or let me just use developer because I can see different instances. So this one is going to look for senior developers in this beach, in this yeah. So this one, like we don't have people there, but then let's try Houston, or let's say New York. No, what are we looking for? Okay, yeah, let me try to use New York. New York, and then also New York, we don't have people there. Let me try to use San Antonio. When it doesn't return, it means that the condition hasn't been met, like this. And then this person is there. So you can combine. Now remember, when you use or is going to check either of the condition, either both of them or one of them is met. If one of them is met, it's going to return, or all of them have been met, is going to return. So in this case, it's going to return all the instances of the developer and all the instances of Antonio. So you can see now we're having more results if you use the or. Or is optional, like it's going to look for if the condition is true, and also this other one is true. If either of them is true, it's going to return. If none of them is not true, that's when it's not going to return. So this or is like optional. It's going to check two conditions. If either of them is true, it's going to return. If one of them is true, it's going to also return. But then if all of them are not true, it's not going to return anything. Yeah, so this is on the where. But then if you're using aggregation, like in this one, like for example, let's say we wanted to also filter, let's say on this group by, let's say we wanted to use that where. Remember, where is not going to work here after the aggregation. So for example, and say for example where this one, where number of product is less than, let's say, okay, it's greater than 10 perhaps. So when I write this one, it's not going to work. I'm going to get here an error. Now, whenever you are trying to write a condition after the group by, you'll be using the having, which works similar to the where, only that this one applies on an aggregated result. So you can see now it's going to work. It's going to work similar to the where, only that only applies on the group by. Remember, if you want to use the where, it should be before the group by. So you can have the where here, where. So the where is a condition that has going to be done before the aggregation. So make sure that you don't use the where after the group by. So group by should come. Okay, when you want to filter after the aggregate, you want to filter the aggregated result, then, or maybe grouped by a result, then you want to make sure that you are using having. Whenever you're using the group by, you can use what? The having. The having instead of the where. Remember, if you wanted to use both the where and the having, then the where will have to begin before the group by. So you'll have here the where before the group by, and then after the group by, then you can also have the having. So that's something that you will need to note. And also there's something also on the group by. Maybe you wanted to sort, sorting on a group by here. For example, this result, let's say we wanted to sort, you can use this operator. Remember now sorting will come now after the group by. So you can say, for example, sort. Wait, not sort, should be order by. Order by. Then you can specify you want to order by what. In this case, we want to order by this. We want to order by this one, but in which format, ascending or descending. So for example, if it is descending, let's say this one, then it's going to begin with the highest to the smallest. Now, apart from descending, you can also order by descending. So first of all, this is descending, which means that it's starting from the highest to the smallest. And then now ascending is going to begin from the smallest to the largest. So for ascending, I'll use A, S, C for ascending. So it's begin from the smallest to the largest. Now that's on order by. Yeah, so guys, remember you can find the complete explanations on the LMS. So make sure that if you are following and you are not enrolled, make sure that you have enrolled on nametech.com courses. Go to the courses and then find the SQL. In fact, I'll provide the link in the description. So the other thing that I want us to talk about as we try to wind down, I want us to talk about the joins, the SQL joins. SQL joins. SQL joins. SQL joins. But then now for the joins, I'm going to illustrate how it works by using the Venn diagram. I believe some of you managed to go to high school, or maybe I don't know if it is in Canvas first year or whatever. You learn something about the Venn diagram. The Venn diagrams tries to illustrate, for example, you're trying to combine maybe set 1 to set 2. Maybe let's say they're intersecting, like you have some common values, it will be intersecting somewhere. So we'll be trying to maybe understand the union, the intersection, and all that. So let me try to draw a Venn diagram so that for those who don't understand how the Venn diagram works, we'll be able to also know it. Now I'm going to draw this. Okay, let me just use this symbol. Let me just use this diagram. Let me draw not a perfect circle, but you'll just understand it. So this is, assume this is my first set. Then now the second one, I'm going to do it here. So this place where they are meeting is called intersection. This place is called intersection. So if it were set, this could be maybe set A, and then this set B. Then where they are meeting, where we have the common values, it will be the intersection. It will be the intersection. So the joins, like I'm going to demonstrate it this way. Now on the joins, like for example, let's say you wanted to find the right join. Now the right join I'll be talking about, this is the left table, like on my hand, this is the left side, this is the right side. So this is the left table, because we are talking about the tables. This is the left tables, this is the right table. Now when you're talking about the left join, it means that you want to join, okay, like on the left join is going to return or retrieve. The left join is going to retrieve all the records from the left table plus the matching records on the right table, which means this part of the intersection. So it's going to return everything here, including the duplicates here at the intersection. And the right join is going to return everything from the right table plus the intersection here, like at the matching records from A, which are here in the intersection. Now, since this field here in the intersection involves the records from both tables, so it's going to return everything from B plus the matching records from A. But then since these values are common, so you'll be having the duplicates also. And then now, if you are to look for the intersection, it means that you're trying to look only for the matching records. The matching records here, of which is called an inner join. In SQL is called the inner join. So you're trying to look for only this part here. And then now the full join is like you're trying to combine everything here. It is rarely used. It's like you're trying to combine table A and table B. So it's like you're going to just combine everything. This one is rarely used because it's just going to have like a many duplicates there. It's rarely used, but then we're going to understand each of them. So let's now go to the code, and we can be able to understand how it works. Now I'll try to use our symbol tables. Let me use the symbol tables we had created before, that had the primary key foreign key relationship. I hope it is there at the top. There's okay, these orders, and then it is referencing the customers. So there's orders, and then there's customers. Let's first of all retrieve it. So select all from the customers. Now this one I not need to provide the database because the connection is already established with the database. So let me say customer. Customer, I don't know customers or customer. Yeah, customer is there. And then also we have the orders. Order. I don't know orders or orders. Yeah, orders is there. So this is the two tables, and what is common between these two? We have the ID. We have the ID, custom ID on the customer table, which is now a primary key, and that the orders it is referencing it is a foreign key, also through the custom ID. So these are the these are the common column that I will be using to link the two tables. It's like at this part of the intersection. So I want us to begin with the inner join. Now remember the first table that we usually begin with, that part of the from, that will be like your left table. The first table you begin to specify is your left table. So let me write here SQL, then let me say let's begin with any of them. For example, let's say select all. Okay, select all. Now this part of the from, this table that you are going to specify from, is like your left table. The starting table is like the left table. So in this case it is customers. Customers. And then you specify the kind of the join. In this case it is inner join. The inner join is like this part of the intersection. This part of the intersection here. So the inner join, then you specify the table that you're trying to join to it. So it will be like your right table. In this case is orders table. Orders table. Then you'll need to specify. The columns that you are trying you are using to join them, or maybe they are the columns that you are using to join them. So in this case we are going to use between these two tables we are going to use give me a moment. Okay, so basically between these two tables, like you'll need to specify what you are going to, okay, like the columns that we are going to use to join them. So we'll be using on keyword here. Then here you can specify the columns. So you'll specify, for example, the customer customer ID, customer stable, customer ID column, and orders dot customer ID. So these are the linking tables. So when you run them, you're going to return the matching value. So you can see now it is returning this. Now you are able to see the duplicates because it is because it's like trying to get, because we have those instances like this part of the intersection, it involves the records from A and also the records from B. So these values, this what is linking them is an ID. So the ID that is here, for example, from A, it means that it's also here in B. That's why you're able to see the duplicates. So instead of having two or whatever, you are seeing three. Okay, like we are seeing like two instances. Yeah. So it's going to return this part of the intersection, like the IDs that has linked them. Like anything that has an ID, it's going to return here. But then now you notice, because you are having the customer ID in the orders table, you're also having the ID in the customers table. If you try to link them together, you will be so it is like a replica. You will be repeating yourself. You are trying to repeat yourself. So in this case, you might want to explicitly specify the columns. But the issue here is that we're using different tables. So if I try to write it like this, I'll get an error. If I'll try to just write it this way, I'm going to get what? An error, because it's trying to struggle to know this customer ID or maybe this last name belongs to which table. So you'll get an error. So to fix it, you can specify, for example, the customer ID from which table. So you say the table before the column. So for example, customer table, customer ID, customer table, first name, customer table, last name, customer table. I don't know address if it is in the customer. Yeah, it is in the customer table. And then the order ID, it is in the orders table. So I'll be using the orders. So I'll say here orders table dot order ID, and then I also orders table dot order ID. So this way I'll not get what? An error. I'll not get an error. Now you notice that these customers, these tables, they are very long. You can as well create an alias to the tables there. So you can say, for example, AS is like the AKA or maybe a nickname. So we can say customer to be C, and then the orders to be O, So in this case, I'll need to also change here to C and O. So when I do this, I will not need to write here customer. I'll just write here C. I will also write here C instead of customer. I'll just use now their alias C. No, sorry, here C. Then here I will use O. This one also O, and then you still get the same result. So this is on the inner join. The inner join, I say that it's going to return or retrieve all the matching records, from the from both tables, actually, from both tables, like that part of the intersection that I demonstrated with the Venn diagram. Now the other thing is the right join. So okay, let's begin with the left join. The left join, in our case, we said it is this table, the customer. So in this case, I will say, for example, left. When I say left join, let's say left join, it means that I will be retrieving all the records from the customers table. In this case, what is our customers tables? This table. So we have two records here. It's going to return these two plus the matching records on the other side on the orders table. So you'll be seeing this result when I run here. You'll be able to see those two results. Okay, where is it? Okay, this is the left join. The left join. Yeah, so basically this is the left join. First of all, let me see the customers table. Yeah, so basically this is the result. Now actually this is going to give you this pretty much the same. In fact, let me try to add in some extra records on the customers table. Let me try to add in some extra records so that at least there will be some distinction there, some you will be able to understand well. Let me try add in some record that will not be referenced. Maybe I can say this is the student. I want to see the customers. Let's see customers table. These users, this is orders, this is customer. Now on the customer, let me try to add in now 4, also 5, so that we'll be able to understand well. So you can see now on the customers, we have the records up to number 5, which doesn't have not been referenced, like number 4 and number 5 have not been referenced in the orders table. So here, when you say left join, so it's going to return everything from the left table, which you had the records that has not been referenced this other side, that number 4 and 5. So when I will run here, you can see it's going to include those that have been that has not been referenced. These are number 4 and number 5, but this other side is going to give you null because it wasn't referenced. So it's going to make sure that all the records from the left table, in this case your customer is like at the left table, plus the matching records in the right table, which is now the orders table. If they are not matching, then it's going to give none. Okay, that's clear. Then the right join is going to be the opposite. The right join now is going to return all the records from the orders this other side. So it's not going to have this 4 and 5 because it's not matching. Basically, the right join is going to retrieve all the records from the right table plus only the matching records in the left table. And in the left table, we don't have a matching records for number 4 and number 5 have not been referenced. So this one is not going to be returned when you use the right join. So you can see it is not returning them. And then now lastly, we have the what do you call it, the cross join. Now the cross join is like trying to combine entire table. So this one is, you are not like trying to join them based on particular IDs. So this is like trying to combine everything from the first table and the second table. So this one is rarely used. And this one you not even need to have this ID, the primary key foreign key, because you are actually trying to you're just trying to like reference everything there. So this one is going to give you like a big result, so this should be O. I forgot, this should be O. So this one is going to give you like a big value. I'm getting this error. No, I should specify, so there should be cross join. Cross join. So this one is like it's trying to combine everything, so you can see it's quite lengthy. And then now guys, basically the last thing that I want us to talk about, it is the CTEs and the views. These are just temporary. Okay, these are tables that you're going to create based on a particular condition. We say CTE and CTE. What is that? CTE and views. CTEs and views. So what are CTEs, what are views? Now, basically, CTE stands for the common table expression. Like, sometimes you've written something like this, and then maybe you want to use this result now. Let's say we have written that code, and we want to create another, maybe a temporary table. Okay, not really creating another table, but then now let's say we wanted to use this result. I wanted to use this result, but then now you notice that the code that has given you that result, it is quite lengthy. So what you do, instead of like referring to everything here, you can create a CTE or maybe a temporary table. Now, if you want to create a CTE, I say that the CTE is a temporary table or a common table expression. Like let's say this is the code that has given you this result, and you wanted to use this result without like referencing the entire query that gave you that result. So you can save like the entire query in something like a variable. Something like a variable that is going to hold this entire query that gave you this result, so that in future you just use that that name, that variable that is going to stand for this entire thing. So in that case, you'll be using what to create a CTE, you'll be using the width. You say, for example, width, then the name of the CTE. For example, let's say cross join. Let me just call it cross underscore join. With cross join s, then I will write this entire expression. Maybe you can write it here in brackets, not a must. Like I can write it here this way. Let me do that way. So you'll be writing it this way, but then now you need to use it. So this one you need to use it. How do you use it? For example, you can say select, then all. Now this time I'll be referencing that CTE. So now from this cross join now. So this cross join is going to be so this cross join is going to be like a variable that has this entire query that gave us this result. So when I will run this one, it's going to give me this result. So now remember, this one is just within the same cell. If you open in a new cell, it's not going to be remembered. So this is just within now the same cell. Now, if you wanted to use to create a permanent kind of a permanent one, but then remember, all of this is depending on this original one here. So this like the original, the city is like a variable that is going to hold this entire query, so that you don't have to rewrite everything in the event. For example, you wanted to use that code again, you just created something like a variable, so that you're going to just reference that variable, and then that variable is going to stand for this entire query. Now, if you wanted to create something like a permanent kind of a solution, you can use views. Views is similar to the CTE, only that this one is saved. It's not much temporary. It is still depending on this original, but this one can be saved. You can access it anywhere. So, for example, let me say now to create a view, you're going to use the command create view. Create a view. And then at the view name, for example, this cross join, maybe I can call it cross join view. View. So first of all, let me just show you the difference. So if I try to run this CTE, remember this is the CTE we have created. So if I will try to run this one, let me see. If I try to run this CTE here at the bottom, this CTE now I want to reference this. Okay, if I want to reference this one, I'm going to get here an error. That there's no table like a cross join, which means this table that we are trying to reference here is just a temporary one. So we'll be getting this error. So the views solve that error. When you create that new with the create view, it's going to be like a variable that's going to hold this entire query that has given you this result, but it's going to be saved on your database. So when I will run this code, here, then this one is going to be saved in the database. So now in future, when I try to say, for example, a cross join, okay, like let's say SQL. For example, let me say let me say select all. Now from this cross join view, I will not get an error like the other one from the views. So this one is going to treat it as a table, as a table. Only that this table, it is as a result of this entire query. So this is the query that gave you a particular solution. So you are trying to save that query on a variable, so that in future you just reference that variable instead of like writing the entire query. It depends on the original. For example, if the original is affected, also it's going to affect the view. Only that this one is saved there. Like when you go to this other side, then you click here on the views. Let me try to refresh. It is the users. Then you can see now on the views, I'm able to see this one. On the views section, I'm able to see these views. So a views is like a more of a permanent solution, but still depends on the original. So guys, I want to stop it there. Remember, SQL is quite broad. You'll need to do a lot of practice, and there are many commands we haven't mentioned, but I've given you some kind of a roadmap or everything you require on the SQL. So make sure that you practice and also explore other commands. Remember the other thing that we haven't mentioned, especially on the filters. Remember the filters also. This how you handle the date time. The other things that I haven't mentioned, some other commands. So make sure that you explore them. But assume this course is a roadmap to understanding the SQL complete. So you will need to do a lot of projects with the skills that you have acquired until you become a pro. And I wish you all the best in your learning journey. And please make sure to subscribe, like, and share it to your friends. Until next time, this is Nehemiah. Goodbye.